You will now be placed into conference. There are 15 participants in the conference.
That's about 75% less than we usually hear. It used to be 50 or 60. Ding, 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 ding. Hey, Bert, you're in the middle of session.
Presentation on taxes.
It's a Wasilla Jim. No, it was on Twitter. Apparently people walked in and were sitting down at the desks that were for legislators, and Bert Cottle, who's the mayor of Wasilla, retired police officer and former mayor in Valdez, or he was the police chief in Valdez. He's standing in the back. I'm going, Bert, what are you doing on the floor? Yeah, Bert was the cop, and he was the police chief, and he was the mayor. Couldn't do anything else. Wasilla became the mayor.
Yeah. Yeah, right. How's it testing prior to not having test logs that are running?
Hey, Bill?
Yeah,
that's right.
We are not having okay, I'll go back to break.
Yeah, we're going back.
I don't deal with this.
You got fruit.
I was in Shell driving and I'm like, what? Trying to get that with I was like, just proud of that, and I'm like, oh, and it's on top of that.
Well, I guess I could probably
Do it again.
Twitter rabbit hole.
Yet another sign of civilization at Fairbanks? Beer with straws. Yeah, there you go. Trying to remember what they call kombucha. They get several names for the stuff.
Probably pretty good.
Well, it certainly varies by the producer.
One time I tried it, I heard that was the worst thing. besides
Where did you do
the
that?
castor oil and stuff, my parents used to try to give me as a kid.
Just has like a jar. All right. Like she doesn't.
Oh, party. Well,
I only sipped it once, so I should.
should we start without Erica?
Yeah, there's a lot of different things.
Is the recorder on?
Not that weird.
That's one fermented. No.
So anybody got any, hot scoop from, what's the name of that place? Oh, Juno.
There's still a significant size of them also. The Twitter feeds are showing that some are sitting on the tables in the middle school, and there are audience members that have now come and sat down at the other tables.
Yeah, they're occupying it, yeah.
Actually hollering for the override.
Yeah.
Bert Cottle's standing in the back, on what would be the floor, just sort of standing there. I thought, Bert, get off the floor. But,
And the scary thing is that the overrides hold, and the vetoes hold at midnight.
right, well, right. Every 5 days. And, I suspect that they may be so democratic that they'll never get to the point of actually counting votes, because if they do that, then that motion is considered and all those complications. So my guess is without everybody there, we can take those votes and all those, and just step back to rules and table it tomorrow, put back to the second reading or whatever.
Okay,
Phone is on.
pardon my crunching. This is the Marijuana Control Board, we are back in session.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Milks, as it turns out, Ms. Milks had not had an opportunity to do a thorough review of the draft data use agreement, nor had the AAG for DHSS. I think I put that wrong on the agenda. My apologies. So if we could push this off to either tomorrow or Friday to give them an opportunity to look at it.
We will hold it at the call of council.
Thank you.
Yes. Which brings us to license report? Is that correct?
Enforcement report.
Enforcement report. Oh,
The conference is no longer in listen-only mode.
we do have to send our best wishes to Michael, who's, what, this weekend she getting married?
It's either this weekend or the following one.
I think it was like this
Yeah.
weekend, and she said there's no way I can start her. So, you're out there, Michael, best wishes, congratulations. Okay, Enforcement Supervisor's report, James Holscher, are you with us?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm here.
Good afternoon, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, members of the public, licensees, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome Lieutenant Jaime to the board. Thank you for volunteering to be on the Marijuana Control Board. Look forward to talking with you and meeting you in person. So this year marks the third year that we've had alcohol and marijuana licenses operating during the summer, and it's proven to be a continuing challenge for enforcement. We're starting to gain a baseline and an idea of some of the strengths and challenges of enforcing the regulations of both alcohol and marijuana.
Hey, James, just 1 second. Folks, please, your phones, we hear a couple of conversations going on there. We're trying to get a report here from, enforcement. I know everybody wants to listen to it, so, please check and make sure your phones are muted. Thank you. Go ahead, James.
Thank you. So we've opened recruitment for a Special Investigator 1 in Fairbanks after Investigator Stone Cipher resigned. She resigned effective June 18th for personal reasons. We hope to fill the position quickly with a qualified applicant. The applications or the opening closed last Friday, and I am currently reviewing with the assistance of the other hiring manager to see if we have any qualified applicants that we can interview and hopefully get moving forward on filling that position. We also are in the home stretch of creating student intern positions, which will be utilized for compliance checks and shoulder taps for both alcohol and marijuana. According to our Human Resources, HR, who has received feedback from the Department of Administration and Division of Personnel and Labor Relations, it appears to them that the student intern 1 or 2 positions will work best for this purpose. Enforcement has provided all requested documents to Director McConnell for review and final submission to HR. I want to point out that it's normally illegal to hire based off of age, ethnicity, and gender. However, in specific situations, it's appropriate to hire, not hire, for specific reasons. This is one of the many challenges that we have been presented with, but the goal lies in sight, and we hope to have more positive news in the future. So, as the boards over the years have requested statistics, some of the ways that it's been presented has changed, and we like to show that it's evolving, hopefully, to a more understandable form for the board. As you can see, the major statistics that we keep are in blue on the column, and the second column is the statistics that we've made from the last board meeting to this current board meeting. The third and final row is the statistics from the beginning of the year to the time that I made the report. Does the board have any questions regarding those statistics?
Question, folks, okay, it sounds like somebody's like driving a car or riding a motorcycle. There are people whose phones are on. If you're doing it deliberately, bad job. If you're doing it inadvertently, put your phones on mute. We're getting feedback. I'm trying to hear this report from Chief Olsher, and we're going to probably have licensees on the phone here later on, so have some respect for everybody, please, and mute your phones. Okay, go ahead, James.
Thank you. Those statistics go along with the third page of my report that shows a pie graph of basically the breakdown of percentages of our calls. As you can see from the beginning of the year, we have a substantial amount of phone calls, but of those phone calls, very little ends up actually ending up to be the worst of what's considered the worst on enforcement of those issues. So I go back. Does the board have any questions regarding what I've talked to or mentioned so far?
I don't see any, so go ahead.
All right. So moving forward to 3AAC 30677F and G, advertisement location and warnings printed on the backs of advertisements. So enforcement has received numerous questions regarding the printing of warnings on the back of an advertisement or a coupon. Advertisement has informed the licensees that this practice is prohibited due to the warning not being plainly visible to everybody and that may be reading or receiving the advertisement or coupon. This is further supported by the requirement for font size for the warning to be visible. We're being asked that if the marijuana licensees can utilize newspapers that... I'm sorry, let me back up a little bit. Does the board support that interpretation from enforcement about warnings being having to be printed on the front of coupons or advertisements?
Any discussion, members, on this? I mean, we're talking about generally something that's coupon size, right?
Yes.
And
we're talking about an advertisement, Mr. Chair.
right, handout though, a flyer.
Yeah, or stuck on, in this one of the cases, stuck directly on a newspaper.
Okay, yeah, and we've seen those. My thought is that the warnings, should be right there in the front. Anybody else got any?
Through the chair, I guess I feel like as long as the warnings are included in its own one piece of paper or one piece of documentation, it would be okay to have it on the back. I don't want to limit folks in their ability to advertise, but I do want the warnings included. You know, some coupons are small, some, they do have these peel-offs on newspapers, and, you know, as long as the warnings are included on that type of small advertisement, it's not like a newspaper advertisement where you can only have, you know, really print on one side, you can't have it on the back side of a coupon in a newspaper or something, but, you know, I think as long as it's included, it's attached on one sheet of paper or printable surface, it should be fine. I don't know how other members of the board feel.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
So regarding that, past interpretation by the board is a font size has to be font size 9, I believe, which I pointed out in my last report or the report prior. That equates to about, or in an advisory, it equates to about 1/8 inch. So if these advertisements are small, and we have that requirement of the font size being visible to anybody looking at that, or warnings being presented in a way that they're on the back of a coupon when somebody may never pick that up and look at it, I have to disagree with that. The warnings, per your guys' regulation and per your guys' past recommendations, especially with the font size being a size that is able to be read by somebody looking at that, the expectation of somebody having to pick up an advertisement or enforcement seeing a picture of it, which we've had in a past case last April, where somebody said that it was an advertisement and we only saw a photo of it on the internet, and they proceeded to stick on the warnings after they got issued a notice of violation. I think there's a huge reason why the warning should be on the front, and I would encourage the board to really look at this and respect what enforcement has to do in relation to enforcing what the board's interpretations are, because if you say that they're supposed to be in the back, there's going to be some circumstances when enforcement can't, it's not going to be, the expectation is not going to be there for enforcement to be able to enforce that. So I would ask that you please pass enforceable or have enforceable interpretations of the regulations that you already passed.
Well, take a comment. You know, we require labeling to have warnings on them as well, but if you look at the labeling for, I would say, almost 100% of our products that we sell, you have a label on the front and you have a label on the back. The label on the back is the one that has the warning. You know, we're not talking about a picture, we're not talking about something on the internet, we're talking about something that, you know, is physically held, or a sticker on the paper. You know, the font size does have to be a certain size. That's because it has to be readable. That doesn't depict on where it has to be displayed. Again, I understand some of the challenges that enforcement has enforcing some of these regulations, but, you know, I think as long as the warnings are attached to the advertisement, you know, one sheet of paper, you can't have two pieces, you know, hand you a coupon and then hand you the warnings. It's one sheet of paper. I still think that's...
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
So this kind of leads into a bigger picture of should the public have to go through some sort of effort to find the warnings? And this reminds me of a similar issue that we dealt with web advertising. Is it okay to have your advertising with a click here to read the warnings? And, you know, Mr. Miller has talked about, well, as long as it's on one sheet of paper, it's okay, but it is sort of a slippery slope of what do you expect the public to have to do to find the warnings? The board has said there have to be warnings, they're important, as Mr. Holscher said, there has to be a font size. I have to agree with Mr. Holscher that it's really unreasonable to expect the public to have to go through extra steps to see the warnings if the board thinks that the warnings are appropriate. I know that, I will say that in other states, they have started out with longer warnings and ended up shortening them down to fewer statements, and maybe the board wants to take a look at that to see what other states have done, and maybe you can find that we don't need as many statements as we have, but I think it's a slippery slope when you start saying, oh, well, if the public just folds here and presses here and clicks here, then they can find the warnings, and that's okay. I know that's a little bit of an exaggeration,
That's a huge exaggeration to what I'm saying. If I have a piece of paper and I flip it over, you know.
But
only
then
people
what is, we'll
21
just click here, it's one click, it's no big deal, and then, I mean, it sort of does lead you down that road.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead, James.
in response to the warnings or multiple labels being on packages, the difference between that and an advertisement is somebody who receives that is actually purchasing it and is already in a marijuana store, and they're holding the product. They went there for a reason, so the advertisement is unnecessary, but the warnings are there for anybody who might see that package, a child per se, that it's in child-proof packaging, or if somebody, God forbid, leaves it out for them to read. Those warnings are there on a physical package, which I do understand Mr. Miller's point on that, but I do gotta say that we do require the warnings on the back of the label, where all the required labels or requirements are on that same label. So, I would ask the board to consider all of the aspects of this when discussing this.
Yeah, and I think this is a perfectly reasonable question. I mean, I've seen the front page of newspaper stickers. Jones, any thoughts?
I got a lot of thoughts.
Okay.
It's how to express just a few of them. We're sort of in a unique situation of having to regulate something that on other products in which there are enforced warning labels and warning things are generally done at a federal level. I'm talking about tobacco products, tobacco advertising. A lot of places we are allowing marijuana advertising, you're not allowed to advertise tobacco. Newspapers, print medias, and their warnings have to be there. There's size and where they are in a cigarette package, and one of the reasons for not allowing singles to be sold is you can't put a warning as clearly. There's certainly the warning signs on alcohol and FAS that have to be in the bars, and I don't know exactly what's on the bottles, but there are warnings, and those are generally set and enforced by federal agencies. But given the status of marijuana, we have to do the enforcement. And so I fall back on those levels of advertising, and pretty much without getting into all the specifics, which I don't know, it has to be visible, it has to be easily seen, and it has to provide the public health purpose of it, which is to give adequate warning to the consumer. I find it always amazing that we have to warn consumers that this product is bad for you, but we still allow it to be sold. But that's beside the point. So I fall back on that, and if I look at tobacco and if I look at alcohol, and then I look at what we might do with, when I see a sticky on my newspaper, it's usually somebody who I don't want to see, and it's blocking the headline or the picture that I want to see, and I rip it off and it goes straight to garbage. I'm not going to turn it over. It has newsprint all over it. I probably couldn't read it anyway. It has something on the back. I've never seen anybody print something on the back and then be able to stick it on something, but maybe there is a technology. I noticed our label guy's not here anymore, so I can't ask him. So I agree that I think it needs to be visible, easily seen, to serve its public health purpose, which is a warning to the consumer about the product that they may or may not be consuming or may not buy. And so I have to go along with the interpretation that enforcement has made at this point.
Comment?
No, I agree with everything you said.
Okay, so, we still have an advertising committee, right?
Yes,
Okay. Have they got a regs project right now?
yes.
Okay. Have anything to do with this?
It can include this.
Okay. I would say for now, somebody would like to make a motion or just agree with enforcement's current interpretation. I think we can do that with the word current in there, and, put it on the table with the advertising committee, and, see how it shakes out. James, your current interpretation is that warnings must be on the front of advertising that is subject to regulation by the board. Is that right? James, you still there?
I'm sorry you cut out a couple times. But
Story of my life. So you're asking us to agree with your current, with your interpretation, for us to currently agree with your interpretation that advertising regulated by this board must contain standard warning on its front.
I got most of that, but yes, that is, you said standard warnings by, and I didn't hear what was after that.
Okay, advertising subject to regulation by the board, must have the standard warnings on the front of the advertising.
Correct, visible.
Okay, yeah, visible. So-
Right now. Yeah. No worries.
Okay, so, and again, I mean, my suggestion is that this is it's not a permanent rule, but it is current agreement with the interpretation of enforcement, which they are passing on as advice to licensees. So, since I don't think it's gonna pass unanimously, we'll do a quick roll call. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Jaime?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
No.
And I'm a yes, so, there you go, James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Along with that, and this might fall along the same lines as that, is we're also being asked if marijuana licensees can utilize newspapers to advertise product. And all of you are familiar with the Anchorage Press. The Anchorage Press has a pretty unique subscription or delivery area, which is a little more narrow, not as broad as like the Anchorage Daily News or Alaska Daily News. So we've seen warnings or advertisements in both of those newspapers. Knowing that and not restricting licensees to advertise in those newspapers, while we have regulations that restrict advertisements within 1,000 feet of schools and et cetera, 306-770 F1 through 5, does the board intend this restriction to apply to print advertising in publications which can be moved in and out of restricted areas within that 1,000 feet? And for example, the same newspaper that we're speaking of that had that coupon on it, I'm sure was delivered to a number of schools. And, having no restrictions on that kind of seems contrary to the regulations that are passed. And in conjunction with that, we've also received requests for vehicle advertisements on the side of their vehicles, and I've addressed the individual licensees and said that would not be acceptable simply because there is no way that they could possibly guarantee, unless a vehicle was continually parked in their lot, and while it's moving, it is not going to move within those restricted areas that I just listed or that I cited earlier. So I'm asking the board to confirm your position regarding this type of advertising.
Passing through a restricted area does not mean you're
Okay,
advertising.
whoever just said passing through a restricted area, please mute your telephone. This is not a public discussion.
And along with that, that's a good point. If they're passing through, what if a 15, 16, 17-year-old or a 21-year-old reads that? That's still in form of advertisement. I mean, just when these planes flying with the banners are flying 10 miles or 5 miles away from the house, you could still see the banner. That's still a form of advertisement.
Oh, no, that's right. And so your point about newspapers especially, I would be willing to wager that more than a couple Anchorage Daily Newses with what was the last sticker I saw? It was from a former board member's business. I'm sure that some of those newspapers were on school teachers' desks, and the advertising was still on there. So, it occurs to me that both the alcohol industry and although liquor stores can advertise in the newspaper, but tobacco industry, they seem to be doing okay with newspaper advertising. But,
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
This is a struggle for me because I understand, you know, advertising newspapers of general circulation, even, you know, subscription types are gonna end up in places that we may or may not like. Certainly every Wednesday in my local newspaper, there's an ad and the Safeway ad and the, you know, the Foodland ad and the liquor store ads. I'm sure a lot of those newspapers end up in schools. When you walk into the grocery store, you don't have to be 21, and those ads are sitting right on the checkout counters where you can just pick them up. And I understand all that. I don't like it, but I also understand that there's no sort of rules against it. And sort of how that's been handled for tobacco at the national level is they don't allow it. We are probably not in that ability to enforce it. I don't want James having to go to the Daily News or the Anchorage Press or to some other circulation and say, you know, you did a magnetic sign that went on the side of a car, and we don't like that. That's not a place I want to put James at. So I had always interpreted the 1,000-foot we put up sign restrictions, and in some places, Seattle's one. There's places you drive around to and huge billboards up, and I had always interpreted that was a sign on the side of a building that housed a retail store or a billboard. I didn't interpret that 1,000 feet to mean a newspaper that could be delivered to a teacher that gets thrown in the trash can and picked up by a 14-year-old. It's probably got a lot of stuff in there I'd rather not a 14-year-old read, let alone see. My vision of censorship doesn't pass very well. So I think we're in a level of, my interpretation would be, you know, if it's a movable publication, but I think a print publication for certain, it's easier to read. You can put readable warnings on a magnetic sticker that would go on the side of a bus or a car that you'd catch the name as it drove by, but you'd never read the warning labels, even if they were in a font size to be readable. So I'm not sure that we can, as much as we would like to, restrict those. Long-winded, my interpretation of the advertising within 1,000 feet would be those advertising a business, like on a billboard or on the side of a business, or if you put it on the side of somebody else's business and say, go 1,000 feet that way, that's not what we want. But a newspaper, I would hope that the business would self-regulate and not put a magnetic sticker on, you know, their company car. I think Brandon talked about that. There hadn't been any robberies at transport, but we asked that the transports not be labeled. I would hope that they wouldn't do that. But I don't think we can restrict the newspaper advertisement. I just don't think we can do that.
And you know, let's look at 770D. I mean, you can put. Let me interrupt it. You can put a sign that says AK Buds and the address on the side of the bus. You can put
you can't.
Not based on our regulations.
On the bus. Well,
Public transportation.
Okay, yeah. But you can, as long as you just have the business name and location, and you don't have any written information about marijuana or marijuana-based product or any photographic or illustrated depictions of marijuana or a marijuana product, other than depictions contained within the established business name, font, and logo, you don't need to have the warning. So, you know, the question about readability and warnings, if I was at, you know, if I had a store, I'd say something as simple as new product arriving weekly, or the freshest in town, and that sort of phraseology is exempt from the warning. So I guess we've said this before to the industry is, you know, be a little smarter in what you're doing. Don't say, oh yeah, we just got, you know, the greatest bud from Lauren Jones's Greenery in Juneau, yeah, then you gotta have the warning. Just name of your business, you know, new products all the time, freshest product,
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead, James.
I'm sorry, my apologies, but what you're saying is contrary to the regulation. They cannot mention anything about products. That if they did so, they wouldn't be exempt from providing the warnings.
Well, any written information about marijuana or a marijuana product. Well, I would think that as long as it doesn't say marijuana, that, you know.
Oh, no, that's a giant slippery slope.
Is it? Okay.
Oh, a strain name, doesn't say marijuana, but you said...
Blame it on the vegetarian selling it. All right. Okay, well, let me not get us any further off track. What do we want to do with newspapers? Your points are very well taken, Mr. Jones, on that. I don't think that it's our job through regulation of advertising to demonize a product. And in some respects, the initial very conservative approach that the board took in writing some of these regulations could be construed as doing that. At the same time, we still have got a, significant public interest to recognize, respect, and protect. So.
Well, and I've always basically had the same interpretation that Mr. Jones has had, right? You can't, we can't control where newspapers go, we can't control where magazines go. What we can control are the places that we do advertise should not be a sports type event sponsored for a school. I mean, that would be kind of off limits for, a publication, but, general circulation, it's not intended to be directed towards the schools and things like that. I'm where you are with this.
And I think there's a couple other things, when early in my career when I was in Alphone Derby, one of the local businesses where Alcohol came and said, well, what if we were going to sponsor something up at the ski area, or if we were going to sponsor something someplace else? And I said, if it's primarily an adult event, fine. If it's not, then no, you shouldn't be there, even though it might have a lot of adults there. The purpose is family, kids. And they've honored that, a lot, and I think there's that. But one of the industry members from Juneau testified or talked at our chamber and said something about they were prohibited from advertising in circulations that didn't have a certifiable over 21 subscription list or something. Never have been able to track down exactly what that meant. But, marijuana, I guess there's 3 or 4 publications, I keep reading their names, I don't subscribe, but, pretty much they control, you have to be over 21 to get a subscription, although they end up every place. But newspapers, generally, they're not seen by just people that are 21 and over. And unless we do an outright ban, I don't think we should be in the business of outright banning them. If the industry gets their wish and at the federal level, suddenly it becomes less restricted or more legal, I think you're going to find a lot of federal restrictions on advertising because of liquor and tobacco that'll follow along with that liberalization, and we may find our rules just completely thrown out the window because of federal rules. So be careful what you wish for some days.
Okay, so what do we want to do here?
I don't know that there's anything we can do other than I think James has heard us that if it's in a newspaper, there's little we can do as long as the warnings are there, readable in the font size. If somebody is willing to pay the Daily News for all that space that the warning signs take up, and still pay their taxes, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, this is something that we can work to clarify in the advertising regulation and in the advertising committee. So I think, we've heard the sense of the board on this particular issue, and we can work to amend the language to reflect that. I would also ask that the board not take a position on the car magnets at this time, because I think the committee needs to put some thought into that, because those are signs as well, and vehicles can be parked for long periods of time in location, and they can act as signs in ways that have ramifications. So I think some additional thought should be put into this issue.
No, I agree. Okay, James, you good with what you got from us on that?
I absolutely do, and I appreciate that. I just want to state for the record that enforcement is not trying to demonize any type of advertisement for advertisement of marijuana or product. And I want to remind, just as Harriet brought up earlier, is even though marijuana is legal, there is a vast majority of people, 47%, that did not vote for this. And I want to remind the board and the people listening that a vast majority of our complaints are coming from those people who don't agree that this should be legal. I have to be able to tell them something. I have to be able to have a straightforward answer. And hearing from the board and me being able to tell people that this is what the board determined, that takes a lot of weight off of my shoulders. So this is my purpose for doing this. So thank you.
You bet. Okay, well, let's move on to the meat and potatoes here on 355.
So, 306, 355, limit on quantity sold. And as you guys will recall, I actually brought this up back to the board, I think, for the exact same issue and the same exact recommendation. And I would ask, because of that, that has been an ongoing issue, that the board revisit this. I'm recommending a regulations project for this particular regulation, simply because of the confusion that it causes under Section 3. So the board has already made a determination that regardless of the potency of the marijuana, somebody can purchase up to 1 ounce of marijuana, regardless of if it's over, 22%, somewhere around there. The board said because statute says that you can have 1 ounce of marijuana, the THC limit, and it does not matter. But with that being said, we also have the same issue with concentrate. So,
Boy, that looks mighty nice on a hot, smoky day.
Okay, whoever looks mighty nice on a hot, smoky day, please mute your telephone.
So recently we've been asked or informed that if a concentrate is over 80%, then the sale of 7 grams is over 5,600 milligrams. Possessing 1 ounce of flour, regardless of potency, is supported by statute. However, the same can't be said about concentrates. So I want to ask the board if they have a concentrate that is over 80%, even though we say that 7 grams under Section 2 says more than 7 grams of marijuana concentrate for inhalation. I would ask the board to revisit that if you are stuck on that 5,600 milligrams for some reason. In addition to that,
Mathematical exercise more than anything else, wouldn't you say?
yes.
Okay.
But in addition to that, it creates confusion with the point of sale systems, where because it says if the total amount of marijuana / marijuana products or both sold contain more than 5,600 milligrams of THC. So that third section is contrary to what the board has determined in the past and what the current law says about ounce of marijuana or 7 grams of marijuana concentrate. So if it's the board's intention for somebody to be able to purchase A, 1 ounce of marijuana regardless of THC content, B, 7 grams of marijuana concentrate regardless of THC limit, and make the limitation of both combined products not more than 5,600 milligrams, I think it needs to be changed.
Okay, that would be a regulations project. Well, I mean, we can't really give you guidance on this informally.
No, I've already taken action on this, and I've taken from what the board said already. I just would like a permanent fix for this, so we don't have this continually brought up year after year.
Okay, is there a motion to open a regulations project on 306, 355, aluminum quantity sold?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, was moved by Mr. Miller, and second by Mr. Jaime. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so there you go, James. Hey, while we have you on the line, before you move to your report, you may have been listening to public testimony. What do you know about this change in metric to include a field requiring the entry of gross weight? I guess is on a manifest?
So, again, we've talked about this in previous meetings. I don't know if at the board recalls some of the conversation that we had. In order for us to not open every single package and weigh every single prepackaged marijuana or anything else, they are required to give you a gross weight with a tub, with all the products that are in there, the packaging, and then weigh the marijuana or have that item separately in there so they can do the math problem and minus the actual weight from the gross weight of some of the packaging that's in there to include what they may be transporting it in. So instead of looking at package by package, opening them up and verifying weights, that's what that gross weight is for. And I believe Kelly Jenkins did talk to the board about this last year, and he broke down why there is a gross weight and the actual weight of the marijuana itself. And I believe he might be coming up here maybe within the next couple months or so. And if this is something that the board would like more presentation on, we can ask him for that.
Well, there's that, but there's also the timing of this. At least according to one person who testified, there was kind of no bulletin for metric that was coming out, and maybe they're like, yeah, we packed up for a big shipment and went in the next morning to do the manifest, and there was a new field. Did that pop up suddenly? And that was it. AMCO's request that that be included in metric. My microphone. Can you hear me now, James?
Yeah, there was no notifications that went out. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. There was notifications sent out prior to them in a bulletin. I can't recall which bulletin, but they were informed that gross weight was in there, and it indicated how they can enter that in. Unfortunately, let's see. Yeah, it was effective May 31st under metric bulletin. Let's see. It says, as of May 31st, transfers will require the gross weight to be entered in metric for each package. The individual transporting the product should weigh or witness the recipient delivery weight and package a product and document the gross weight of the package in the container. You'll be recording the gross weight of each individual metric package on the manifest. You will weigh the entire package as tagged, regardless of the number of separate units that package may contain. Gross weight is the weight of the packaging containing the marijuana, including the weight of the container. Net weight is the weight of the marijuana product in the container and is embedded in the package information. So if you have the gross weight minus the net weight, then you get the weight, basically the tare weight. You can get the tare weight in a reverse way. And I think this is the same way I explained it last year.
What was the date of that metric bulletin?
May 17, 19. And it is bulletin number AKIB 020_051-719.
Okay, so everybody had at least 2 weeks receipt of that, checking their email.
The only problem...
Does those show up on metric? They show up standalone on metric? Is there a, little flag that says, bulletins, or does that get sent out as email, or how does that go out?
Oh, it's a little flag in
It is.
that.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
on the very top, there's a flag. I will say that any licensees that became licensees after this bulletin, it may be confusing, and they should do themselves a favor and go back and look at past bulletins to educate themselves as to some of the requests and changes.
Okay, great. All right, thanks, James. All right, and then, got your, report here.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead.
before we move on to NOVs, because the NOVs kind of coincide, or it's a good segue into NOVs, I know you guys are going to talk about it, but I might not be present during the conversation. When you guys discuss the fine schedule, I would like to point out so the fine schedule would be a huge solution for enforcement and the board. And I would ask that you guys seriously consider that, especially when considering if you guys are going to do away with it. Because it does resolve a lot of issues. It takes away a lot of the weight off of the board, enforcement, and the director as to having to bring everything to the board as an accusation, whereas it can be resolved even before it gets brought to the board, and we can do away with this next segment, or the majority of this next segment that we're about to do. So I would like to say that.
Okay, thanks. Weren't we gonna have, about an hour of public testimony on the,
Right here.
is it? 11:30. Oh.
We've missed the time, but.
Licensing report, oh, yeah, public hearing, yeah.
All right.
Get to this, I do. Okay, all right, you got anything else? Okay, so the NOVs, James, okay, we ready to go to NOVs now?
Yes, and I'll be fairly quick, but I also would like, I guess, some feedback. I know that I've talked to you guys about some odor complaints and things like that, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but I, again, want to point out to the board that these odor complaints are becoming a huge issue that possibly could be resolved by something like a fine schedule. So, moving from there, one of the things that early on the board made a determination under notices of violation that they didn't require a licensee to respond to a notice of violation based on the determination of the difference of the wording that was in notice of violations. And that interpretation from the board it's become a problem simply because we have licensees that are issued NOVs that the board is saying, hey, we want you to respond, it's better for you to respond, and we have a number of licensees that just never respond, and there's never no answer for the public, for the board, for enforcement, to see if they're even addressing the problems that we're pointing out. And it seems contrary to me of why, if we're going to write a violation, how that violation just gets tossed out into the air and nothing happens with it. That just seems, from an enforcement standpoint, it's like charging somebody or sending charging documents to the district attorney, and you know they're out there, they read them, and nothing ever occurs, and nobody ever has a chance to answer like a fix-it ticket or anything like that. It doesn't make sense to me, and I'm asking the board to consider that because of the number of licenses that you will see in this board packet that have not responded to notices of violation. You will see over time that it has progressed significantly, that licensees just don't respond. I don't know if it's because they get too busy. I don't know if it's because they know that nothing will occur if they don't respond. But this, from an enforcement standpoint, at least with me, is highly unacceptable because it leaves a problem unaddressed.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
I thought the board had fixed that in the fact that we said it's better for you to respond. And I understand your position. Deal with that a lot in minor sort of civil violations and stuff in Juneau. Resolved so that we don't necessarily either burden our police or our attorneys. You know, it's like the third violation is a mandatory court appearance. So you give, as an example, a tourist shop in Juneau that has a buster sitting on the sidewalk trying to get people to come into their business. That's illegal. The first time they're cited by the police, it's a $50 fine. Second is a $100 fine. The third is a mandatory court appearance. What we found is they shipped that guy out after the second violation. He's not able to commit the third. But you know, I understand your frustration of not getting a response. Are they paying attention? But I read the NOVs and I don't necessarily see the same, I see the same issue being violated, but I don't always see the same business violating it. And so one has to assume that the business got the notice of violation, did a correction, and we don't see them again, whether they responded to us or not. So I may be the last person you expected to give a business the benefit of the doubt, but I think in this particular case, and I agree, we're going to talk about the fine schedule and that kind of thing, and part of that discussion was an NOV, you know, and then your other comment about it as well, it's like setting up a bill to indict to an attorney and never getting anything back. Basically, as far as the board's concerned, unless we have an accusation that comes from the director, you know, it's hard for us to act on an NOV. And so you may not get a lot of direct feedback from us, and that may be frustrating for you, but I don't know of any desire on my part to necessarily change that today. And I think that's hard, but you're dealing with a civil issue, you're dealing with a violation, and that, the way I've seen it work other places is it builds up. So one of the things that we talked about was notice of violation. When do we get to a fine, or when do we get to an accusation? And I'm not sure I understand all that. So I know that may not be the answer you wanted to hear from the board, but at least it's my answer based on, you know, I've read all the NOVs over time.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Chair, may I respond?
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the problems that we see in this is, number one, the board's interpretation of response. And just for clarification, so Lieutenant Jaime can know exactly which statute or regulation I'm referring to, it's 3 AAC 306-805 D. And in that big paragraph where it says a marijuana establishment that receives a notice of violation may respond to the notice orally or in writing. So the board has determined that to mean that they don't have to respond at all, whereas enforcement and our attorney, if I recall correctly, interpreted that as they may respond orally or in writing, one of two ways, but they have to respond. So with that being said, the reason why that's there is you guys took this directly from alcohol. And in the alcohol regulations, if a licensee does not respond, and it says that they have to respond, if a licensee does not respond, they receive another notice of violation that's attached to the initial violation, showing the board that they failed to respond both times and they did not communicate with the board as directed. That kind of leads into the accusation area, and that is a clear path in alcohol where it's not in marijuana, simply because of these problems that have been presented to us that I keep bringing up over and over again. And I'm happy that you sense the frustration, because it's there and it won't go away, because I don't believe that everybody who receives a notice of violation should be punished to the highest extent. What I do believe is if somebody receives a notice of violation, that they tell the board exactly why that happened and why that occurred. That is a basis for them being in compliance. And I will say that most of the NOVs that are issued are one-time violations, but there is a large amount of notices of violation that are the same issue to the same licensees that I've talked to the director about and the boards about, that they need to be moved towards an accusation. So I guess having a clear pathway is something we both agree on, but how to get there is something that I haven't agreed, especially since this interpretation was passed. So I'm glad that you again sense the frustration, and it's not my intention to make more work for the board or to keep saying these things over and over again. But as an enforcement supervisor, to bring attention to the licensees to make sure that they're in compliance with the regulations that the board passed. I need to be able to understand that they understand why that violation occurred and how they're not going to repeat it. And I can say confidently to the board, with a majority of them that do respond, that it is a legitimate reason why it was a mistake, and enforcement doesn't believe it was intentional. It didn't have anything to do with diversion or anything criminal, and that kind of leads into that whole area and aspect right there. So I just, again, want to point out that the problems that that interpretation has caused, and the lack of not having that second mechanism with communication of licensee and our regulations for marijuana also causes a breakdown in communication.
Let me ask Ms. Milks, maybe one of my usual oddball questions. Are there any potential Fifth Amendment implications to having a regulation say must respond to a notice of violation? Because it says that the NOV can be used as grounds for an accusation, action by the board. It does say may, and maybe I'm imagining things, but did we debate the difference between may and shall and must when we were doing the regulations project? I mean, I can't remember that far back, but my pertinent question is, would there be any, I know it's kind of a constitutional question, but would there be a Fifth Amendment consideration in requiring somebody to respond to an NOV rather than giving them the option to, especially if maybe something egregious has happened and the process is going?
I don't see any.
Okay, all right. Okay. So, James, you'd like it if it said must?
Welcome to the GCI Conference Center. Please enter. Thank you. Please stand by. I'll be placed into conference. There are 52 participants in the conference.
Okay. And just in this stack here, it was kind of pointed out to us that the majority of the NOVs this time around are tax issues. So I think one was for $14, but so if I was a licensee and I got an NOV saying you haven't paid your taxes, yeah, I know, right? And I'm paying them, and I'm expecting the Department of Revenue to send notice to AMCO that it's got paid. So what's, just anecdotally, what percentage of NOVs that don't go any further than an NOV are not responded to?
In this packet or past packets?
No, in general.
I've never looked up that percentage, but all I can tell you is it's growing substantially. The amount of no responses in this packet is substantially larger than what is in past packets. So I just see it as a pattern that more and more licensees are choosing not to respond, and my conclusion to that is because they know that nothing will occur if they don't respond. And it leaves you as a board and the general public not understanding or not knowing some of the issues or problems that presents. And I can move on. I still need to discuss a couple NOVs in here and let the board know about that kind of point to this concern that we had one response, which is great because it creates an avenue for us to address the board to see if they're correct or we're correct. because these kind of issues come up where they have a valid reason for why something occurred in their minds. Whereas we need more clarification from the board to see if that's the way of thinking of the board. Because enforcement, unfortunately for a lot of people, enforcement does take a more conservative approach because that's the way enforcement is. That's the nature of the beast. It's not because as individuals we're prude and we want to make everything more difficult for people. It's just because enforcement in itself is a conservative act. So, with that being said, if I can move on to the NOVs and maybe that could be...
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so the first violation listed in your guys' the NOV packet is from Lyndon Anson, Alaskan Blooms, license number 10314. And they were written up for a notice of violation for exceeding the quantity set out in 306-355. And as you see, they had an advertisement that they removed because they saw that it was a mistake, and they worked great with us. But the advertisement in itself said, buy an ounce of silver OG flour for $200 and qualify to purchase a gram of OG crumble for $30. Now, if an ounce and a gram is over an ounce of what's allowed to be sold, there is no time difference there for a later date. It doesn't say for future purchase of a gram of silver OG crumble. It just says for a gram. So the response given by Alaskan Blooms was exactly that they were saying that the people who qualify, who buy the 1 ounce, qualify for a future purchase of the 1 gram. And I guess the reason why I bring this one up is I think it's important to let the licensees know that if an ad is run, it should say exactly what it means to say. It shouldn't hit any gray areas where this one does. If one word or a couple words were added into that advertisement, such as buy an ounce of silver OG flour for $200 and qualify for a future purchase or next visit purchase of a gram of silver OG crumble for $30, that wouldn't fall under a violation or insinuate that a violation of exceeding the limit set out in 306-355 would be a violation. So I would, and I guess I'm asking the board, does the board see it from that perspective where it is the responsibility of the licensee to indicate in their advertisements that they are not violating any of our regulations?
Well, one would think so. One would think so. I mean, it's prudent business practice. If you're a car dealer, you don't turn no dollars back, but I probably can't say that. But, and I read this, and when I first read it, it kind of confused me, and then, so the advertisement was, in a respect, it was misleading, and so, and as the licensee responded, that was the idea. So people watch how they're writing ads and
Well, Mr. Chairman, I read that differently, and I agree that maybe there's an issue with the advertisement, probably enough to issue an NOV. But, the real penalty, I think, would come if Chief Olsher's idea is this doesn't say for a future, and so what they're doing is saying, I will sell you more than an ounce, which would be a violation. There's no violation unless they actually sell more than an ounce. If the liquor store in Anchorage years ago could only ship 2 quarts to an individual in a month to Bethel, and they ship 3, they might advertise I could ship you 3, but if they don't ship 3, they haven't made any violation. And so That's the real potential penalty or problem here, not 2 words missing out of an advertising. So I understand where you're coming from, Chief, and I'm just saying that, you know, I thought we had said you can't give discounts. I thought we had said you can't do X, Y, Z, but maybe I'm wrong about that too. So, but, you know, to me, the real violation would have been if they sold somebody more than an ounce in a day. And I'm sure that maybe some of that's happening unbeknownst to even the retailer. If somebody came in at 8 o'clock in the morning and was a 4th person on shift at 7 at night, and somebody came in and bought another ounce, I'm sure that's probably happening. So, anyway, I guess I understand where the chief's coming from. I just don't necessarily agree that we should be spending a lot of time arguing about it.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
I agree. I'm not trying to argue, but for sake of clarification, the violation is not exceeding the limit. The violation is actually 306-310, an act prohibited by a retail store by offering to sell a quantity exceeding the limit set out in 306-355. That is a violation.
31084.
It's right at the very bottom of that NOV cites exactly what regulation that is a violation of. So I understand there might be a bit of a communication issue of maybe how I presented it, but the NOV itself specifically cites which regulation was violated, and that is a violation because it is an act that was prohibited for a retail store.
James, he did leave off that it's A4 that's being considered the violation.
Well, he listed A and 4 in there. I mean, the text of A and 4.
They're up there.
No, right, it's right. This is a violation of 306, 310, and then he lists A and 4.
So I understand. So moving forward, some of the non-responses that are self-reported, I don't have a huge concern about because they self-reported, and in their self-reports, they kind of a lot of times explain why something occurred, and they tell us how they're going to prevent it again in the future. So if you see anywhere, as indicated in prior meetings, if they say self-report and we don't address them as issues, those are okay. One of the ones that I find concerning is a no response from Parallel 64. 10174. And as you, page number 12.
Okay.
And as you can see with the attached photo, I mean, number one, the transport says that a person is responsible for securing and transporting. The licensee checked this baggage, which we have indicated that that is not acceptable because it leaves the care and the security of the individual doing the transport. And as you can see from the label that's on that box and how it's secured, that is a mislabel right there. That is identifying the state of Alaska as a recipient of that box. I think something like that where, while the intentions might not be criminal, they definitely were misleading, and it shows anybody that would be viewing that box that is being addressed to a state of Alaska entity.
Well, on top of that, it's checked baggage, which it ain't supposed to be.
Exactly. So, and I want to remind the board that this is one of those things that we did not get a response back of them explaining why they did both things. So, of all the other ones, the tax violations and everything else, those kind of get self-resolved some way, shape, or form, and there's really not too many ways somebody can explain those. But when you start breaking down into, let's say, an odor complaint or transport violation or a discrepancy in metric, that starts opening the book where enforcement as investigators can start moving down towards a path to see if this is something more than it actually is. And this is one of those things that This right here, I definitely think should have had a response.
Well, I'm real concerned about this one because number one, it's checked baggage, which means it got handled by a number of people. TSA. TSA could have. It says only one padlock, which is. I'm glad it wasn't my problem. You know, they could have been opened very easily. No, this one, I consider this one pretty egregious. And I personally hope that there will be more than just one unanswered, and it will be regarding this. And the industry ought to be real concerned about it. If there's guys that are, you know, checking product baggage, you know, people, the transportation on airplanes is very refined to a fine art, as I am given to understand. This was not very artistic. I won't say anymore. Did this happen to win? The date on this?
May.
May, yeah, so yeah, you should have heard something back from him. Okay. Go ahead, Jim.
Mr. Chairman, that is pretty much all that I can think of right now. Unless the board has any questions.
Form. Okay, all right, thank you, James. Appreciate it. And if you're on when we're talking about the fine schedule, good. Otherwise, you'll hear about it. Okay, which brings us to licensing report. So who are we looking for? We're looking for Michael here. Michael, are you with us?
I am with you.
Good afternoon.
All right. As always, I will probably take about an hour from my report. We have not had any staffing changes, so I omitted that section for my report for this board meeting. I do have a couple of updates to the renewal application statuses since that was mentioned earlier. At the time that we sort of finalized the list of licenses that need to renew, we have about 328 licenses that need to renew. We had a bunch of them move into active operating status in the 11th hour. And as of today, we have had about 40 applications that have not been submitted and we have not received any kind of communication for, which is only about 12% of the licenses that are due to renew. So everyone else has either contacted our office and said they're not renewing, which is about 2 licenses, or stated or provided us documents to begin the renewal process. And then today on the timeline for new and transferred applications, we have the time for transfers is up a little bit for this reporting period, but still relatively short considering the historical timelines. And the to-be review queue has moved from 4 to 12 applications awaiting review at this time.
All right. Any questions on license report? So when are you getting married? This weekend?
Yep, Saturday.
Are you excited?
I am so excited.
Right on. Okay, cool. All right. Well, thank you for your report, and it was a quick hour. I wish everybody did their hour-long reports that quick. Speaking of hour-long reports, let's take a few minutes, and then we'll come back and toss a coin on whether we want to do the public hearing or whether we want to do number 23.
So 2:30?
Yeah, 2:30 is close enough. Yeah.
He doesn't give us time.
I knew this
We'll call it.
Yeah. But if they're not here, it's kind of a little unfair to jump ahead and like, oh, sorry.
Well, yeah, but well, we don't enforce it. I don't know what type of flight it is. It's an evening flight, so we can control.
Yeah.
Can the simplest form of language, homework is mine.
Okay.
City Borough Council, is the architect, sees it on the vehicle. The person throws it in the trash.
Filed suit against who?
Yeah.
The whole legislature?
What time's your flight?
Somebody in the city. Tell us.
All right, okay, so, all right, we'll go to, we'll record that.
It's not gonna be hot.
Where is that?
If they wanna protest it, they go see somebody else. The cop never finds out, so.
Filed by Bill Satterberg.
Exactly.
Why do I know him?
Because he was alcohol,
In our mind, it's
met with
a violation.
Satterberg Law Firm,
Yeah.
that is a book.
Yeah. On behalf of LBZ, against Frank Richmond and Kathy Diesel.
How did that?
So she went to
Huh, thank you.
So, I mean, it would be the same, I mean, like I said, like wrote something on this cop busts his butt, does an investigation on a burglary. Identifies the suspect. Puts all the material together, sends it to the DA. The DA never says anything back. I understand that happens across the board. The police chief may be able to go to the DA. But I know that Officer John Doe, who did it work, DA called it the chief.
Smoke chokes Fairbanks.
Chief officer
Ever aired here.
doing his role as police chief.
It looked hard to find some good news here.
Yeah.
It should look hard to find some good news.
We're evolving, we have great relationships.
Man swept over Niagara Falls, survived.
Okay, that's
Good news.
Alright,
Kenai River dip netting opens and fish counts are promising.
that's good news. Good, thank you.
But it is hard, I agree, I had to go pretty far down to find those.
And the industry out there, like everything else, we're gonna try to find alternative advantage. Okay, so when he comes in, he says, I interpreted this.
Yes, there's a hot and a cold.
He's asking us to tell him that he should know, and sometimes it's even expressive. And that's the frustrating part for him. I agree with you. Yeah. I'm just more than just, well, you know, I'm doing my job. Right. Yeah. One of the things is, we're talking about, right. Well, one of the things that we read down, if we want to pull something out, we can ask them about it, we can talk to them. The other thing is when, at the no meeting, you'll be a whole list of licenses up for renewal. 90% of the director will renew. So we have told the director, any business up for renewal had an NOD, then that comes back to us. And so,
Within the last year.
within the last year.
Yeah, within the licensing period.
So, if there are 4 NOVs for license X, if there's one NOV, we'll look at that thing, renew. If it's 4, we might actually have.
Or depending on the region.
Exactly. So there is some teeth, but automatically is there. And I think that's why he's saying, and why we were working on the fine schedule well, I know what you're saying. Yeah, right. We had worked on that, the staff had put one out, the board had sent it out for public comment, well, I guess we worked on it, the subcommittee, we sent it out for public comment. Police chief and Sitka and I worked on it. It came back, there was lots of questions, the director and I worked on it, and we're back at for iteration. So basically it's to address some of what the chief's talking about, they go out and they write up something, okay? that there would be a consequence. And, as you'll see in the complaint schedule, some of them are pretty substantial, so, and some of the complaints were too substantial. And so what the director and I talked about is maybe the first offense isn't being fine. Second offense becomes fine. Third offense becomes a suspension. You know, within a 12-month period. So the fine schedule is part of that. I don't know if you say instantaneous. If I get a person taking my immediate thing, I owe the city $20, $30. If I don't pay it, you know, penalty on me, nothing until I get my second. And then I'm gonna pay first and second, I'm gonna pay a fine. Yeah, and if I don't pay that, maybe in 6 months I owe $1,000.
Or you can take a jet.
Or I could take it to jail, right? We're not quite that way, because this is civil, not criminal. So I think as we talk about the fine schedule, depending on a lot of people here. But,
I don't think
yeah. But I think they're against maybe the size of some of the fines. I think they're, and what'll end up today, no matter what we do, is it'll.
I'm better about email anyway.
Because we can't adopt it today, because we can't change it.
Yeah, we'll take care of the whole show.
Yeah, it'll be curious as to how we work it out.
So Eric, do I have access, well, actually, I don't know, if needed or really want it, but metric, or like these bulletins,
You do not.
okay, so
But-
not the bulletins or anything?
No. I can get them to you. I could send them to you regularly if you want to see them.
Absolutely.
I could also.
I feel so far.
It's a lot. It's a lot. If you want to schedule sometime when he's coming to Anchorage,
Mhm.
sometime that we can go over metric, and I
Okay.
can show you what it looks like and.
And I've seen metric when I did my little seed to sale, tour. I mean,
Oh, okay.
they showed me all that. The labeling, you know, so it is a comprehensive system. But like the
You looked
bulletins.
at it from the licensee side?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's a little different from the state side.
Okay.
Too, so,
Oh, I'd absolutely love to do that.
yeah,
And I come to Anchorage kind of regularly, but I'm always jam-packed and stuff.
sure.
The next time I have time, I will let you know as soon as I do.
Great, and we'll make it work. It'll either be me or one of the enforcement
Okay.
guys.
No,
or maybe
that's great.
both of us.
No, I look forward to that, actually.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
You said we might take a pass 23. Look at that one.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll be fired. Say that now.
I don't know how many of those are.
I need more.
Seems smoky in here again.
Yeah, it does.
Myself, because I've been live with it by not even knowing, because we're around. But having her to see for taking back, we got to stop for something, they're like, come back.
It was the last thing.
Alrighty, I will do the public hearing right now.
Okay.
She's not going till 7:30, so she's good.
Why were these senators, why was Hughes using?
I don't know.
Shelley Hughes.
What'd she do?
They were excused and absent from the vote. Representative Rauscher,
Well, McChichy's out fishing.
Representative Sutton,
Others in town.
Senator Shelley Hughes, Peter McChickey, David Wilson.
Oh, yeah, just something to play with there, yeah. So this is your own invention, or your wife's invention? Your wife's invention, yeah. Is she gonna pass that?
Well, I think we'll probably have to apply so that we can say have to apply or have to.
Yeah, she's gonna apply for it,
Considerable experience in the past with that.
I will definitely attest that this is child-proof. Yeah, sell this damn thing, match the mechanism. The mechanism, and, the description, use can be habit. This is the kind of thing, I mean, so it's CIA, man, I mean, you can come and find this could be used as what they call a concealed device. Yeah, I mean, you showed me, but squeeze it there.
So that's good, that it's not intuitive, right?
No.
You just sit down and.
Oh, Okay, so that's, I mean, that's enough delay. Check this out. Show that to them. Don't show them how it works. Don't show them how it works.
Something you guys.
Okay, we're going back on the record here. It's 2:35. We're gonna go into the public hearing on the proposed fine schedule, which is like a computer.
Yeah. Who's coming?
That is here in a second.
Okay. Do you know if you're speaking at the Hall of Fame ceremony?
The conference is now in listen-only mode.
Okay, so tab 9, it's proposed fine schedule. We had a little bit of discussion about this at last meetings. We promised we'd have an hour of public hearing on this. So at this time, is there anybody in the room that would like to testify on the proposed regulations project, which is Amendment 3 AAC 306-805? Anybody? On the fine schedule only? Okay. Okay, introduce yourself. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Trevor Haynes, General Manager for Good LLC. I'm here to object to the proposed violation fine schedule. I strongly believe that this proposal, if implemented, will not achieve the objective of promoting industry compliance. Rather, it would have the opposite effect. Because punishments under this fine schedule are overly severe and arbitrary in severity, the proposed fine schedule will, 1, discourage self-reporting and decrease transparency, 2, lead to overly severe punishments for good actors, and 3, ultimately burden and shut down companies that are trying to abide by regulations. I propose that producing an effective solution will require cooperation with industry and non-industry groups. In other words, a working group. This group would work towards creating regulations that promote best business practices and compliance, effectively punishes bad actors, and increases transparency and self-reporting. This working group should evaluate compliance models by 1, determining the desired compliance goals, 2, consider existing compliance models and determine which models would be most effective in achieving compliance goals and most transferable to the cannabis industry, and 3, examine proposed models using Alaska's historic data on violations. In other words, violations data since inception of the industry. This assessment would be simple. How would proposed compliance models have affected the cannabis businesses since inception of Alaska's cannabis industry? Specifically, how many businesses would have their licenses revoked by now? What would be the annual fine burden for an average business? Is this overly onerous on businesses? Would the compliance model achieve the desired compliance goals while minimizing undesired outcomes? Understanding the consequences of proposed regulations will be the only way to build effective compliance regulations in the industry and avoid unintended consequences. One last thing I'll say is that we heard James Holscher today saying that the majority of the violations are simply mistakes, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, that do not reoccur and done without intentional malign intent. And I think that is really something that needs to be taken into consideration based on this fine schedule that was proposed. With that, thank you for the opportunity to provide comment today.
All right, thanks for hanging. Anybody else in the room that would like to testify on the proposed fine schedule? Sure, come on up, identify yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Coates. I am the co-owner of Urban Extracts in Kenai, Alaska. I believe establishing these fines for violations is a bad idea at this point in the industry. The board and AMCO should be encouraging transparency within the industry to achieve compliance. The table of fines does not achieve that at all. Overall, it seems that the board and AMCO are slowly creating an atmosphere that is geared towards creating non-transparency. Any violation type that is a metric clerical error, including virtual transfers, should not be a violation, let alone a fine. For example, most virtual transfers are due to clerical issues that once the error is discovered, we just want to make it right in the system. No product has been put on the shelf, no minor has gained access to the cannabis, etc. It's generally a clerical bookkeeping issue. No harm, no foul. The metric software is far from perfect. As a product manufacturer, we will transport thousands and thousands of packages within a year. We are human, and there will be errors in the transfer paperwork on occasion. It gets discovered by us or the receiving store. The transfer part of metrics is so poorly designed, and transfer errors are common enough that even metric employees tell us on the phone that it happens every day, so don't sweat it. They have put in software updates to try and help tell you that you have an error in the transfer, but it doesn't tell you where the error is. When you think you found the error and made the appropriate corrections to your manifest, it would make sense for the error to disappear. And it does, but not in a timely manner. It can take up to 6 hours or overnight to see if you corrected the transfer error. Why fine for this sort of thing? I do believe that AMCO should also look at the heart of each violation issue. Did the violator willfully commit the violation, or was it an accident? If it was willful, were they warned about it in the past? Was public safety jeopardized? If yes, then a fine could be issued. Did they take steps to try and ensure it doesn't happen again? If public safety is not in any way harmed, they should be given a pass. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your efforts.
Just one quick question. You're talking about the violation that you're talking about, that would be what, failure to utilize and maintain marijuana inventory tracking system? Where you said
Because when
but I mean, where does it appear in the proposal?
Under a transfer site, if I create a transfer in metric under the transfer tab.
Mm-hmm. Right. Oh, no, I'm not talking about where it happens in metric. I'm talking about where the violation appears in this table.
Oh, I don't.
Okay, that's right. It looks like it would probably be like failure to be utilized. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. And I would like to add, if we're going to get NOVs for this as the industry matures and banking becomes available, the banking company may look at us and say, well, how many NOVs did they have? And if I'm getting an NOV for a clerical error, they may not, if that mounts up and becomes a high number, they may look at it as, oh, your business is too risky, we don't want to, we won't let you.
Sure. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Hello. My name is Barrett Goodell. I'm the cultivation manager for...
Is that Eric?
Barrett.
Oh, Barrett, I'm sorry, yeah.
So, as you've heard, I think the big issue with this that a lot of people have, and I'll voice here, is encouraging the communication between enforcement, the board, and the licensees regarding violations. The most common violation that you're seeing is due to metric. And it's not just because people are lazy or unorganized, it's because we deal with it a lot. And every once in a while, you're going to miss a keystroke. And when you do, there's no undo button in metric. So good licensees, what they do is immediately, as soon as it's caught, they contact metric in order to figure out how to change this. Now recently, contacting metric, sometimes the error needs to be approved by AMCO in order to move forward. I understand all that. But to have a violation schedule where if you do that 4 times in a 3-year window that your license could be on the line, it's going to encourage people to find another way around it and not self-report. That's not what we want to encourage. I have a good working relationship with my investigator. If I make a mistake, I am quick to pick up that phone to explain myself so that she can be in the loop. We want to encourage that so that the good actors don't want to become defensive. So those common errors that you've just heard about with metric, you're seeing those over and over. And it's because it's a clerical error. It's going to happen. The important part is that it's rectified. Throwing these penalties out is going to encourage people to find other ways around it without being truthful and straightforward and forthcoming. That's not something that we should be encouraged. That's not the only issue that I have with this fine schedule. It's a big one. because that's very important. But there are other things to take in consideration as well. These 30-day suspensions were egregious things, I agree. For instance, a sale to a minor, that should be an egregious offense. But if there's a disgruntled employee at Mr. Miller's establishment who's about ready to walk out the door, and they do this deed and sell to a minor, should his business be shuttered for 30 days, essentially closing his business? I don't know what the answer is. And I do echo Mr. Haynes' sentiments that there should be a work group to come to these solutions, because this is a big problem, and having 14 pages of regulation changes needs some serious thought. Odor violations is another one that Holscher rightfully is aggravated with, because it keeps coming up and he feels that he doesn't have authority to make these changes that need to occur, and I understand that. But there's also a difference between a vendor who's not doing anything and someone who over a 4-year period has an issue with their HVAC system or charcoal becomes saturated. If you call a filter company and explain what the situation is, and I need this filter for this purpose, there's going to be two answers. One is, our product can do everything for you. And that's the salesman who's just trying to sell a product and isn't being honest. The honest answer is, we can give you these products, we don't know how long they're going to last before they're saturated. It's not an easy answer. There's not enough data. There's a lot of engineering that goes into it. When my AC goes down, which it has, I'm trying as hard as I can to get an HVAC technician to come in and fix that AC quickly. Leave it. Sometimes I can't get them. There's things that are out of the licensee's hands in certain situations. Do these things need to be addressed? Yes. But just slapping these fines down without serious consideration on each item is just isn't our way to go. It needs some deeper thought. I could go on. I won't bore you, because I think a work group is where this type of constructive criticism needs to happen.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, good.
Sure. I understand the testimony. The issue for me is that is the who, when, and why. Every disagreement has two sides. And I don't want to be spending most of my time on this board adjudicating whether you think the odor at your property line was as bad as what the investigator thought. I don't want to have that argument about, well, it was a disgruntled employee, and so he let a minor in, and then he reported it, and we suspend the program. So part of the idea of this is to, put something in place that says to whomever, you shouldn't do this, period. And I understand the clerical issues, I understand that, and maybe there's ways that we haven't looked at to fix that. But I know that if, despite the fact that I'm trained in my driver's license not to speed, and I got warnings all over my newspaper, and they say extra drunk driving patrols on the 4th of July, people still speed, and they still get busted, and they're gonna pay a fine. Whether they think it's justified or not, whether they think they haven't been warned enough, whether they think the dialogue between them and the cops is not so, get where I'm going. It's one thing to be open and transparent, but that works both ways. And so, if somebody has violated one of these conditions 4 times in 3 years, and something we consider to be pretty significant, not a lot of dialogue is left, in my mind. So, I don't disagree with the sentiment, but at some point in time, somebody has to say, this is what the rule is, and if you violate it, no matter what your excuse is, on my way to the hospital, that's why I was doing 95 in a 25 school zone while school was in session. You're going to pay a hell of a fine, and nobody's going to accept that you had that explanation. So I'm curious about how and I should have asked a question. My apologies. How do you expect that kind of dialogue to take place if it's just between the board and us, and we meet 4 times a year, when also the complaint I hear is that enforcement has too much discretion, or enforcement is misinterpreting, and I'll talk about that later, but where is that fine line? Because this was an attempt to narrow that line a little bit.
I'm not positive I understand exactly what your question is. I do hear all your sentiments and agree that a fine schedule is something that can serve this board and enforcement and the industry well. I just don't think that this is ready at this point. And with your driving analogies, I would suggest that it's not always you driving. If it's an employee that does it, can you set up as many safeguards as you can? You better believe it, and you better believe that good industry members will. That doesn't mean that you can't. And you always prevent that. No, so shuttering a business door would be excessive. So I understand that there is a fine line, and we want to get to that. What I'm saying is I would like to work towards it. I don't believe it is ready.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? Ms. Wiltsine.
Hi, just a couple of quick things. First, I thought this draft was actually better, an improvement. I had one question through the chair for the director, if I could. The fine money, is that going to go, do you know if that is going to be eligible to pay off AMCO's debt to the legislature?
I don't know.
You don't know that either?
We don't know.
Okay. A couple of just technical things, I think, or not technical, but things I think that would make this more better for the industry and for the public. You have a section here, section C, that is for repeat offenders within 3 years. I think this chart would be a lot better if it was for a repeat in a 1-year span instead of 3 years. I think 3 years is really long for not to have these kinds of simple repeats. I like that we removed a lot of the suspension parts in the first and second violations. I think that's good. The monetary fines, I like the idea of having some monetary fines. I'm not sure why we have to have these huge numbers, like 10,000, 5,000, 2,500. I wonder if there's a place in the middle we could meet and still make this work and still give enforcement some teeth, but a little less of a monetary ding. I don't agree with the first, and I don't think it's the same in alcohol, and actually, I guess, I don't know if it's the same in alcohol, but the first time you have an employee get tricked by a fake ID, you're selling to a minor. So in this, it would be a 30-day suspension. For a retailer, that would be devastating. So if we could relook at that particular issue, and that's all the comments I had on this. I'd be very interested to hear some kind of confirmation about where the money would go to, because I think that would help the industry understand the importance of whether or not the fine money would be well spent. And then also one other thing is there's language in this draft regulation that requires the licensee to pay the fine with their appeal response, and I think,
so if I may, so on page, bottom of page 9, top of page 10, you either appeal or you respond and pay your fine. And so if you appeal, you present your appeal to the board at the next available meeting. So it's D1, top of page 10. 10 of the packet, 9 of the draft. You appeal the citation to the board by submitting a written request to the director, and it shall be presented to the board at the next available meeting, unless there was product seizure involved. Or 2, you respond in writing and submit your monetary fine.
Okay, I misread that. I was just going through it quick. Thank you. That's all the input I had.
All right, thanks. Let's go to the phones.
The conference is no longer in listen-only mode.
Okay, folks, we are taking public testimony on the proposed fine schedule for the Marijuana Control Board. Is there anybody out there in Radio Land who would like to testify on that matter?
Hi, I would.
Okay, go ahead. Whoever said I would.
Hello, thank you, Chair Springer. My name's Ryan Tunsteth. I own a retail store in Kenai, Alaska called East Rip. Thank you, staff and board, for taking the time to not only revise this, but hear some comments. I also submitted my comments in writing, and so I'm not going to be long, but I think that some of the revisions are very good, and I certainly will comment again if that's the direction this goes for public comment. But I would just, I sort of echo some of Barrett's sentiment in that I do feel like certainly a license over somebody's head should be a last resort. And I think that by and large, you guys have done a good job and have used the tools you have available to you to be able to interpret those as they come. And so I think it's served its purpose, and what we have in front of us is something that I think we can simplify a little bit and work with. And me personally, I really try to look at the areas where anything in the process involves, a human error, an action that is just, something that you could predict over time will probably happen. And so, where we have the opportunity to work those things out of the industry, I think we should really try to do that. But without being long-winded, I appreciate all the work that's gone into this, and I certainly look forward to working on it more. As it is, I think we need to try through the lens of saying, are we looking at this industry as people who are good actors or entirely bad actors? And that will dictate the type of fine schedule you want to come out with. And it feels to me at times like this one will view the industry as bad actors at times. And admittedly, there are those out there. But so, I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I appreciate the continuing work to get enforcement the tools and resources they need to fight the black market, and just look forward to commenting further. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Tunsteth. Is there anybody else online on the phone that would like to testify on the proposed fine schedule? Not hearing anybody. Okay, last chance for romance. Anybody want to testify on the fine schedule? All right, we'll turn the phones off.
The conference is now in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Thank you very much for allowing us to publicly speak about this. My name is Sam Hatchie. I'm leader of Fairbanks, and I work with Senator Company. Kind of wanted to start off with, I do agree with enforcement needs actual enforcement. A fine schedule is a way to do that. It's just so the way that some of these fines are laid out, they are very detrimental to some businesses. For instance, the odor detectable by outside of the facility. There are many people in this industry that violated for that more than 4 times already, whether or not they're actually in violation of an odor agreement or they have a crotchety old neighbor. That shouldn't necessarily mean that if somebody's your neighbor and they don't like you, they can complain and shut your business down. So I feel that one way to do this is to open a working group and table this for the next meeting and get a little bit of industry feedback. I think we're moving in the right direction. I just think they're very steep, and for the most egregious penalties, yes, I agree, people should lose their license, but I think it's really steep right now.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
May I just make a comment
Sure.
to correct a misperception?
Oh,
we don't issue an NOV just because we've received a complaint about an odor. We go out and confirm it ourselves, evaluating wind direction and that sort of thing. So just because we've received a complaint doesn't necessarily mean that there is going to be an NOV issue. So I wanted to just be clear that not yours, but one's crotchety neighbor could not necessarily get your business shut down just because they're crotchety.
I appreciate that, Director.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot. Just a quick question. our menu here is to put it up for public comment, amend it, put it up for public comment, send it back to staff and close it with action. I do think that if we have an opportunity to get some, and we're getting a little bit of a mixed bag of review from industry, which is not unsurprising. I'm sure the Board of Fish gets the same things. So how would we go about having some, a working group, quote unquote, and then we would have to move this action to, say, September, wouldn't we?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we could just say it's the sentiment, if it is, the board, that there be a informal work group, including industry, get together, try to get everybody in the same room, go over this, hash it out, tune it up a little bit more. Then we'll circle around to where we are now in September.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think the options that I've proposed in the memo are not perhaps expressed fully enough, but the concept of sort of sending it back for more work would include creation of some sort of working group to do some additional work on the project.
Okay. All right. Any other public comment in the room on the proposal? Okay, not seeing any, we'll close public comment. Is there any board discussion about either anything we heard or any, not motioned amendments, but possibly some, changes that might want to go in here? Because I can think of a couple.
Well, I think from my perspective, I do think things are, some of the items listed here, the fines and other items are still really stiff, especially for mistakes. And, we're talking, I look at things on two sides, people who willfully do things wrong and don't care, and those folks who are trying to work in a good manner and they make a mistake. So I still feel that, not everything in this table, I believe, deserves a fine. It might just be a teaching moment, right? Help the licensee do better, help the industry do better. But I would also like to see some description of how these would be applied. Does someone walk into your facility, see something and say, oh, here's a ticket? How do we plan on applying these fines? And so I don't know if we could get some kind of description on how that might happen as well. It is better, and that's what we would hope for. But I would like to see it get a lot better before we moved it forward for a vote.
One thing that I know this one for sure is combined. This violation is combined. Although it's a number of regulations. Licensee/employee failure to display marijuana handler permit or ID badge. Semicolon, maintain the permit on person or premises. Seems to me that the word maintain is different from failure to display. I mean, one of them I think would be business records. Failure to have that ID on file, and as opposed to, oh, hi James, oh yeah, I left my badge out in the car. And getting an NOV, and so who should get violated? Should it be and I don't think we have a mechanism to do this yet, but should it be the handler card holder or the licensee? Granted, licensee has a responsibility to make sure that everybody's wearing their credentials, but I think this one, for example, could get broke out. You could split that in half, because you've got almost a personal action as opposed to a business record action. The discussion about clerical errors, I think, is really legit. And I think that some of these are, especially these first violations are pretty high. So I would definitely encourage a working group. Send it back to, yes, sir.
As I was part of the first two working groups, I will not be part of the third. I would suggest that you seriously read 805, pages 1, 2, closely, because working with Chief Angerfeld, and also then working again with the director, the idea was that, you know, what we might consider the first violation to get the citation that would cause the fine is not the first action. And so if you look at this, we basically put back in the steps. So you can do an inspection report. I was in there, I found this, you should be correcting this. There is an advisory report that says, hey, you know, before we do anything, you should be thinking about this. There is back in a notice of violation. And in some of these, we actually made that next violation a notice of violation. And then there's the citation of violation that starts the fine. So, you know, we're not talking about a $5,000 fine, or some of these, the first time it might have been noticed by somebody. There may have been 2 or 3 other instances in which it has been noticed, that the board has been noticed, before the citation is issued. It takes the citation to be issued. If we as a board started seeing a citation that resulted in a fine of $2,000, $5,000, and we go, why did you do that? Well, you know, I think that was an egregious thing. Well, has the person ever done it before? Have you ever seen it on an inspection? Have you done an NOV? Did you do a warning? Did you do this? And the inspector said, no, I think we would look sort of suspect. And so in working with the director, I tried to find a way in which, without starting out with a fine, you had some kind of progression, but also a progression that took some of the criticism of enforcement being arbitrary and capricious or misinterpreting or whatever. So I think if you pick out, you know, clerical error on a manifest, if the first time you did that, you got a citation, I think this board would have an issue with enforcement. You know, if, as somebody testified, it happens 4 or 5 times in a year, then maybe they need to get somebody that can better type without hitting the T key instead of the C key. But it to me there is that progression, and that's why the first part put back in the NOV. That's why back in here we actually did work on some of the fines went to a notice of violation, which would actually, if they follow this sort of progression, could be the 5th time before you get to a point where you might get a fine the next time. So before we jump in and say, you know, this is too heavy-handed, but when they get to the fine, if you read that front section, it shouldn't be the first time. It could be the 3rd or 4th time this has been noticed by enforcement. And then it starts to clock for the 4th time before. So it's possible when somebody says, well, you know, going to a suspension, you know, at 3 years is excessive, you know, that could have been the 6th time or 7th time that had been noticed, that we'd gotten a notice that this business had not been doing whatever it is right. I agree that maybe there's some in here that could be put back a little bit more. I spent a lot of time trying to go through each and every one of those regulations, trying to figure out what it would be, but I really would encourage the board, no working group, because I'm sure that that's the way you're going to go, to read that, because it is a progression. You know, a police officer has a right to give you a warning for a speeding ticket or give you a ticket. I think I'll get a warning if I was doing 10 miles over the speed limit, but I doubt if I'm going to get a warning if I was doing 25 or 30. There's probably nothing in the traffic laws that sort of allows that cop to make that decision, but we sort of accept that. And so I think there is some progression here that's being missed by the critics. I'm certainly not going to discount their criticism because that's what they firmly believe. But there is that progression if you look in the front. So basically you've got an inspection report, an advisory report, a notice of violation before you get to a citation. And so, anyway, I'll stop preaching, but I do think if the working group needs to look at that and understand what that is before you get to the violations, before you say, geez, $2,000 seems like a lot of money for this minor in violation, but if they've done it 4 other times before you get to the citation, then it's not as minor as I think that critics are trying to portray. I shouldn't say them. Don't want to pick on anybody, but so anyway, I'll get off my high horse.
Okay, yeah, no, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Those are all excellent points, yes.
I just want to say, I appreciate Mr. Jones bringing up this issue. I just want to be very clear that there may be a progression that starts with an advisory and goes to an NOV and then starts in the table, but there might not be. So it is not a guarantee. He's very correct that it may possibly be that by the time you get to under this scheme, that by the time you get to the table of citations, that there could be multiple advisories. There actually could have been multiple NOVs, but it is not a guarantee that will be the case in every single time, because it'll depend on the severity of the violation, the certainty with which the violation has been determined, and frankly, the response of the licensee. Mr. Miller, I heard you talk about the difference between someone who just makes a mistake versus someone who's consciously and willingly violating. And sometimes that's difficult to determine because not anybody in this room, I'm sure, but sometimes people don't tell us the truth. And the other thing is that it's very, everybody wants consistency, but they also want discretion. There should be, if we just make a clerical error, it should be okay, versus if we were consciously trying to violate. And so there's tension between consistency and discretion. And there's never going to be a place where everyone's like, yes, that's perfect, you've hit the exact right balance between those two things. So I appreciate Mr. Jones pointing out those things, but I just want it to be very clear on the record that there is no automatic progression for every situation.
I probably spoke because I really wanted there to be a progression, and I understand that that's not always possible. And the director's right. I mean, there is that tension between the discretion and not. And so, if somebody's consistently making a clerical error, and enforcement says it's a clerical error, and the conversations with the business owner that maybe you need to change the staff, let's make it all the clerical errors. But it is important for, I think for the businesses to understand that if it's a well-regulated industry, by the time you get to a citation of a violation, somebody has probably, you either made a really egregious error the first time, or there's been some progression in one investigator or multiple investigators' minds as they've looked at your business practices. It's telling them that there's, something's not right in the way in which you are doing your business and putting in your best practices. So.
Okay, so, and I think there's kind of a differentiation there. I think some of the expression we heard was about what the severity of particular penalties ought to be. And the progression here, maybe it can get clarified a little bit more. The more people understand it, the more comfortable we'll be with it. So do we have a motion do we need a motion to send this back to staff and bring it back in September? I don't think we do.
I guess not. I think.
Anybody opposed to sending this back to staff and taking it up in September?
Chair, the only objection I would have is to making a time certain September. I don't know what kind of workload staff has between now and then. We've got 300 and some odd renewals. We're gonna be dealing with those. If a working group can get together and staff has time, September's cool. If not, December or November. We're out in Palmer. So I would just simply object to it being affirmed September.
Okay, sure. No,
At the earliest, next meeting in which the working group can come to something that's gonna come before us. You know, these guys may be busy harvesting September and not wanna work in a work group, so.
Okay,
anyway.
we'll just send it back to staff, and when it's ready, it's ready.
So.
Have a working group, it should only be.
You should probably get some volunteers from the board, and I will not volunteer.
What about if we just send it out for public comment and get more information from the public? I would rather, I'd rather have more public comment and then the working group get at it than just the working group sitting on it and turn it around again.
Or we could get enough public comment that we could deal with it too.
I don't know. Just an idea.
Yeah. Well, nobody's made any puns, so we don't have any quarters to flip. Well, Director, what's the workload looking like between now and September and November? Pretty busy, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think getting some specific comments from people who are interested in making actual, specific edited comments might be helpful.
Yeah, let's.
Question of the attorney?
Yeah.
Can we put this out for public comment, and have a working group at the same time? That's question one. Question two is, can we put it out for public comment, for 45-day period, convene a working group to work on it before it comes back to us and before we would see those public comments?
Yes to all, and also I was just going to volunteer and say, for what it's worth, there are a couple of drafting inconsistencies in the draft that you've seen just now. I'm not sure it would amount to a substantive change that would require you to put it out again, but my bet is that you'll get sufficient public comment that in combination with the drafting inconsistencies that I would like to change, I can pretty much guarantee this is going to have to go out again. So all of those options are on the table for you.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion that we put these regulations out for public comment for 45 days, and after that public comment, that the board put together a working group to look at those public comments and to bring back to the board another revision at the next available meeting when that work is done.
Okay, so second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Miller. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that's moving. Director, are any of these other regulation projects burning so hot that if we push them to the end of the agenda and don't quite make them, something bad's gonna happen?
No.
Okay, so the chair will take a motion to move tab 10 through 14 to just above marijuana mailbox. Or just above public testimony at the end. Just so we can start whipping. We do have an appeal here to deal with before the end of the day, and
I don't see any problem with that.
okay, all right, we'll do that then. All right, then let us go to tab 23, which is the matter of license 17692, Mr. Happy Farms LLC, a limited cultivation. The licensee, I believe, is here with representation.
And actually, it's the licensee's wife. The
All right.
licensee's on the phone if we need him.
Okay, that's Mr. Happy?
Yeah. I didn't see if the tab was posted a little bit quick, and so I made copies of a couple of exhibits if the board.
Okay, that's fine, yeah.
They're buried in your tabs, but yeah.
Okay, Director, you want to run this down for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wouldn't characterize this as an appeal because I have made no action other than bringing this back to the board.
Okay.
This is a limited cultivation facility that's located at 3900 North Sierra Street in Wasilla, and it was approved by the board with delegation in December of 2018. the Matanuska-Susitna Borough did not protest this application. The delegation was lifted. The license was issued on March 5th, 2019, inspected on April 1st, 2019, at which time the license was provided to the licensee. So they are an active and operating licensee. Mr. Happy Farms LLC, who owns the license, is a limited liability company, owned 75% by Matthew Shelton and 25% by Thomas Dykes. At the end of May 2019, we received communication from a member of the public stating that the location, that the lot on which this premises is located shares a lot line with an elementary school, that notice was not provided to the North Lakes Community Council, and that the license violates the subdivision covenants. The application that was reviewed by staff and the board, the application certified that the proposed premises is not within 500 feet of the ground, and that the North Lakes Community Council had been provided a copy of their application on April 13th, 2018. So neither the staff nor the board was aware of any of this at the time that the application came before the board. So it is true that the lot abuts an elementary school, and so the question becomes how to interpret 306.010, which states 306.010, yes, A, which states that the board will not issue a marijuana establishment license if the licensed premises will be located within 500 feet of a school ground. The distance specified in this subsection must be measured by the shortest pedestrian route from the public entrance of the building in which the licensed premises would be located to the outer boundaries of the school ground. The board has not defined shortest pedestrian route in the past, so you have tended to evaluate these on a case-by-case basis. So for this reason, I brought this back to the board for your evaluation. The other two issues, I did ask the licensee to provide evidence that they had notified the community council, and the response that I received was that they had they had mailed their notice to the community council but had not used a return receipt, and so they have no proof that they did that. And you know, the history of subdivision covenants, I don't think the board has really had a good test of how it evaluates these, so that information is provided to you because it was provided by this Ms. Hanson who sent this information. She subsequently provided a letter, and so all the correspondence is included here. But I particularly brought this before the board because of its location adjacent to the grounds of an elementary school.
Okay, thanks, Director. All right, so let's get a couple on so option one here, your property is outlined in blue?
Right, so the Happy Farms is outlined in blue, and then maybe I'm reading it wrong, but it looks to me like the school is on one parcel, and then there's a completely separate legal parcel. And that's the parcel we're talking about that's within 500 feet, is that correct?
I don't think this is Mr. Happy Farms. This is a example from the Matsu Borough.
Okay, gotcha. Just an example of how they measure it, right, yeah.
So if you look at the third page, Mr. Happy Farms is this yellow lot that's labeled 6.
Right.
And the two large parcels that are directly to the left are both Shaw Elementary School.
Right.
Right, and the second page actually shows the 2 on the aerial, so you can see that dense forest there. And Eric, I was gonna ask you, did you reach out to North Lake Community Council directly, and did they say they didn't get noticed, or?
So, Ms. Hanson, who, let me find her original email.
I saw her emails where she said she used to be on the board, but I wondered if the community council itself did any communications saying that they didn't receive notice.
Her original email to me, I believe, said she was on the community council and hadn't gotten, let's see.
Yeah, that's what.
I am a North Lakes Community Council board member, and we did not receive notice of this application.
So
I didn't do any follow-up after that.
So I got involved in this recently, but my client assures me that they mailed the community council mailer, and your last page of the packet I just handed you shows that even regardless, Erica did notice the community council December 7, 2018. So the issue here is, you know, this is an operating business, and it is far, far away from this school. It's over 2,000 feet away from the school. And so the question is now, are we going to stop this operating business because it abuts an 80-acre parcel of land owned by the school? The trees behind the facility and behind the lot are so thick you can't even walk through them. There's no trail system.
There's no trail system, no pedestrian route. It's private property, heavily wooded, mosquito-infested swamp.
If I might, at least some of the material that was given to us from the council and stuff says that's not true, that people do walk their kids to school through there.
I think that they should, so one of the diagrams that they sent, let me get to the page number here, is page number 7 of your packet. And I believe they have this bar, this yellow bar that says below is the trail to the school. And it's very far, again, very far away from Mr. Happy Farms. And it leads into that parking cul-de-sac. So I think what they're referring to, and I don't want to speak for them, so maybe they're on the phone, is that there's a trailhead there, and that trail goes directly across to the school. And so that is very far away from Mr. Happy Farms, that trail.
But the definition is to the outer boundary of the school, and the outer boundary is right along that line from the arrow that says Mr. Happy Farms to the arrow that says the trail.
Well, grounds infer some type of development, and it doesn't appear like that there's any development.
And it says by near is pedestrian road.
I'm not a lawyer to argue over the definition of grounds, but we had this argument here in Fairbanks where Tanana Chiefs had property that was a residential treatment, even though it was thousands and thousands of feet away, and they only used it periodically as an outward bound, but we had a lot of discussion about that. I think we ended up not issuing the license. I agree here it's a different subject. We have an operating, and we're just learning this. So I guess our option is if we treated it as if, had we known this, would we have approved it versus, you know, now we have a business, and does that eliminate our ability or require us not to correct an error?
We did talk with AMCO and the borough beforehand.
Well, so I'll let you lead next.
My name is Carrie Shelton. Like Janice said, I'm the spouse of Matthew on the phone, and we can bring him in if we need to. But before we even constructed the facility, we built it from the ground up. We felt long and hard. We knew the school was there. We did investigation. We called AMCO. We said, this is our situation. You know, this is where the school is. This is what the ground looks like. They assured us that it was the pedestrian route issue, and, you know, if the pedestrian route is not, you know, through our private property that the facility sits on, then it's not a problem. But the nearest pedestrian route is going all the way through the neighborhood around and to the backside of the school. We talked to the new assistant in the borough, explained the whole thing to them. They had no problem with it. The school itself is not in the community council's boundaries. It's in the Matsu Borough boundaries, although our facility is in the community council boundaries. And the Matsu Borough also had no issue, said they would not protest this at all. So unfortunately, we didn't think at the time that we needed to record these conversations, you know, thinking that this would come up. We were taking people on their, you know, best faith. But these were the conversations that we had before we even put one nail in a piece of wood to build this building.
And I would just add to that, I don't believe, and Erica can correct me if I'm wrong, that we've had any objection from the school. And so this license has been going, you started initiating it in April of 2018. So we're over a year later now. So it's these kinds of situations where people make investments, they get their approval, they go through the process, and then they're open, they're operating, and then somebody comes in and kind of messes up their day. This is over 80 acres away from the actual, or on an 80-acre parcel, and it's over 2,000 feet away, which meets the federal standard, from the actual developed school grounds. So I think we're going into dicey waters if we're going to say an entire 80-acre lot that's undeveloped constitutes school grounds.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
so school grounds is defined in 1171-900 as a building, structure, athletic playing field, playground, parking area, or land contained within the real property boundary line of a public or private preschool, elementary, or secondary school. So clearly, school grounds is the property that is owned by the school, which is this. I apologize, but I really have to doubt that AMCO told anybody that this was a situation that was no problem. My relationship with my staff, they know that this is an issue that would have been brought to my attention, and then I would have brought it to the board's attention, as I have done now. So I just struggle to believe that anyone in my office would have said that.
Mr. Chair, can I?
Sure, go ahead.
My husband and I, he is the sole operator, he's, sole operator, sole cultivator of this facility. We certainly would not have liquidated our retirement funds and invested everything we have into this facility without careful investigation, without absolutely thinking this through and talking to everybody that we thought we needed to talk to. I myself personally, I'm former state director of public health. I have no interest in harming the health of children here, there, or anywhere. This seemed to be a no-brainer to us. Like I said, we talked to everybody. We got assurances. We did everything. We submitted all of the maps and details that we were asked to submit. We were assured it was a pedestrian route issue. The only pedestrian route from our facility to the school is out our front door, through the neighborhood and around.
There may be a relatively simple thing here that you can do. Are you co-owner of the property with your husband?
We do not own the property, we lease the property.
You lease the property.
But we lease the property from the other owner.
Oh, you lease from the other owner. Because what I was going to say is, the word abut means adjoin. So if there was a way, if the borough, I don't know what the borough planning department would allow, but, it's not necessarily an unusual strategy for a piece of land that's, in the way of something or creates a legal issue to be transferred. And so in this case, if, say, the borough would permit the owner to subdivide it by putting in a 10-foot buffer strip, the ownership of which would be transferred to a third party, then you wouldn't be abutting anymore.
Well, and if I may, the property that we sublease from the owner, the other owner lives on that property. His house is there. It's his residential property. We are leasing the spot that our building sits on. So it's his property that plus the school.
Can you resurvey the lease?
I don't think that's going on. The situation we have is this lot line, and it's still within, it's either the way we've been interpreting it as the pedestrian route, or it's not.
Right.
Regardless of where they subdivide this, it's still 500 feet from there.
It's his personal residence that abuts the school ground, not our school.
Mr. Chair, before the board begins discussing, do you want to see if there's somebody, anyone on the phone who wishes to?
The conference is no longer in listen-only mode.
Okay, this is the Marijuana Control Board, and we are talking about the Mr. Happy license number 17692 in Wasilla. Is there anybody on the line that would like to address this issue?
I would.
Go ahead. Identify yourself.
My name's Sam Hansen.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Hansen.
This structure is within 100 feet of the school. The school has daily PE classes that go out into their property, into their trees, into their pathways on a daily basis. And at any time, that school is able to take an adventure through their property line up into this abutting marijuana cultivating place, and they should be allowed to do that. This is something that any school should be able to do. They can at any time build a track, build anything on their property. This Happy Farm is in a residential lot. That residential lot has 69 residents. It's a single-family residential area. It is not a commercial business area. That subdivision does not have a commercial business on it today. It was built in 1988. I believe that this is a license that should not exist in this area. I believe that this license should not be up against the school that should be able to access their lot. If you allow this to happen, that school will have to keep their kids 300 to 400 feet away from his property line to keep him in compliance.
Okay, Ms. Hanson, this is Mark Springer, the chairman. You've raised two different points, and we won't ask you about the residential point, but it's certainly not the school's responsibility to, as you said, maintain compliance. But have you been back there in those woods up against that property line? Have you been able to see the building?
Actually, I was the one that supplied you with the map. No,
Right.
I have not been in there personally, but I do know that their children are allowed to go onto their 80-acre lot daily, and at any time they can build a track, they can build additional buildings, they can use that property. By allowing this, they are not able to use that property and keep them in compliance.
Well, and again, I'm just kind of wondering your perception. This has no bearing on the responsibility of the licensee, but your view that this would obstruct the school from future utilization of that 80 acres for construction, what's that based on?
It's based on the fact that every year they have dog teams on their property. They bring their students, they bring their family members to utilize that property. I know for a fact that the residents next to this lot were not informed that he had posted. I know that he did not provide to the community council that he was doing this. This is a shock to this neighborhood that his license was allowed. I know that he is located next to a school that should be able to, at any time in the future, develop that lot.
Right, and again, I'm just trying to myself, and I'll anybody else on the board get in here if they want, but I'm just trying to determine what, and we'll note that the school district have not communicated with the board on this, and we'll also note that the AMCO office provided on December 7th of 2018? 2018, notice to the community council that the application was under consideration, so the community council at least had that notification. But I'm just trying to, so you haven't been in there in the woods, have you looked at the what we call the premises diagram for this building?
I've been at the school. I know how it's laid out. I also know that when I called the Matt borough regarding this lot line, they were not aware that it was up against the school. When I called the marijuana control office, they were not aware that it was up against the school. I know that this licensee told him that it was not up against the school. That information did not get shared with anyone. And this subdivision that he's in were not aware that this licensee was in operation until June 19th.
Okay, and just finally, well, let me just ask the licensee one question. Are there any windows in your building?
No.
Okay, so the building has no windows. Are there any signs of the building?
No signs except the required, everybody.
All right, so just one more time, what is your view, and I guess you're just a private citizen there in Wasilla, are you associated with the school district, or a teacher, or a parent?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Ms. Hanson.
My grandson attended that school. My dad is named after that school. My dad was the one that built this licensee subdivision. This entire area, there are 6 subdivisions in this area that are all single-family residential. I am very familiar with this area. I've lived here since 1968.
Okay, all right, thank you. Let me just throw it out. Is there any other members of the board have any questions or comments for Ms. Hanson? Okay, not seeing any. Okay, thank you, Ms. Hanson. Is there anybody else on the line? Is there anybody else on the line that is here to address the issue of Mr. Happy Farms LLC license?
I would like to.
Okay, there was a lady there just before you, sir. Ma'am?
Yes, my name is Peggy France. I'm a co-owner of Naked Herbalist, but I don't have any connections with this license that you're looking at. But I would just like to throw this out that if, for some reason, you guys decide to not let this business continue, that maybe you could do a mediation and let them continue for 1 to 3 years so that they can recoup the money from their retirement, because they did, in good faith, try to establish a business and was granted permission. So they should be given some kind of leniency to move their operation to another location. That's all I have to say.
Okay. And then, sir?
Yes, this is Matthew Sheldon, majority owner of Mr. Happy Farms. Just like to speak to the board if I could.
Sure, go ahead.
I apologize for not being there in person. If I didn't think it was important to keep the grow going, I would have definitely been there with Jana and my wife. I do apologize up front for that. And I'm a little nervous because it feels like, my whole life savings is falling apart over a phone. So I apologize if I sound a little off. But my wife covered most of it. I appreciate Mrs. Hanson's testimony. I'm, I don't agree with everything she said, but it's one person's word over another. As we stated, I got 10 years of my life's retirement working at a lead and zinc mine 8 months a year away from my family to do this. So I did not think lightly about this, and this wasn't a snap decision. We, thought we crossed all the I's, dotted all the T's. We paid the fire marshal their money. We paid the Matsu Borough their money. We jumped through every hoop as many times as we had to. There was no malice or, deceit intended in any of our process. I am also, I've been in Alaska for 35 years. I grew up in Shaw-Tri Lakes. I helped my dad build a house on Charlie Drive in 1984, when I was in 6th grade. This community is not unfamiliar to me. And as I'm doing my business, I'm trying to support the community. I use local vendors. I use Matsu Water. I donate my fair share to Matanuska Electric. Anytime I can buy local and support my community and my family, that's what I choose to do. So, like I said, excuse me. Yeah, there was no malice intended in any of this, and you know, as far as you know, what I see in the lot, I've worked on this building 6 to 7 days a week for the last year. I've been out here. This is a heavily wooded area. I cannot see, you know, 50 yards into the trees. They're so thick. I've never heard anybody walking around other than wildlife. I'm out here all the time. You know, if it was my child and a teacher took them in this woods, I would be upset because they were that far away from the school with this much wildlife around. I've walked back there 500 feet, and there are no pedestrian trails. There are game trails. So that's, you know, I don't want to encroach on the school property because that's private property, so I didn't walk too far. But that's, you know, my interpretation of the school use land is I have just not seen it. And like you said, if I thought this was going to be the problem it was, I would have took my $100,000 somewhere else and, you know, made a business somewhere where I thought I could, you know, not have these problems.
Okay.
Can I comment?
Could
Go ahead, Ms. Wilson.
I chime in here? Looking at the second to last page of the document I handed you, it's my understanding that there's this little blue dotted line and it says government lot line. So it's my understanding there's two parcels and the school owns both of them, but the school sits on one and then it owns the other. Am I understanding that it should be that it's just the grounds should be considered just one parcel?
Am I able to comment?
I'm sorry,
Just 1 minute, ma'am. Go ahead, Director.
I just don't think that's accurate. If you look at page 48 of the tab, this is the Matniscus of our land information parcel report, and Shaw Elementary is both of those parcels.
Definitely on both of those parcels. I don't disagree with that.
So it is the school grounds is both of those parcels.
Well, two different parcels, schools can own land anywhere. I mean, the Arizona School District owns the most land in Arizona.
I think the issue is shortest pedestrian route, not whether or not this is a school ground.
Okay, is that Ms. Hanson that wanted to speak again?
I would.
Very brief.
Thank you. I attended the last North Lake Community Council board meeting, and the Community Council approved our president to send a letter to you regarding our support to not allow this licensee to continue. Because of your requirements not to comment, he was not able to comment today. I didn't realize that we could comment during the testimony for having this be talked about. So I asked him to not comment. He was going to call the school president to find out what he thought about it and to share with you that our community council does not approve of this licensee. One, because he didn't share with you that he was against the school. Two, he is up against the school. And three, because it is against the covenants for his lot to even have a legal commercial development on that lot. And we want to protect our subdivisions that do have covenants that don't allow a commercial development.
All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hanson.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else out there who wants to, in the subdivision there, that wants to testify on this?
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Ms. Hanson, are you on the community council?
I am. I'm a board member. I'm at large.
So do you recall getting that notice from AMCO on December 7th?
No, we didn't. Actually, I shouldn't say that. If it did come in, it wasn't shared with our members. We do not meet in December. We didn't meet till January 31st, and it wasn't shared with our community council, so that message did not get to this subdivision.
All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, I think we're done with the phones right now.
The conference is now in listen-only mode.
Okay, you are leasing how large a piece of property for your building there?
Just the building.
You are leasing just the footprint
Front
that
of
the
the
building
building.
is on?
Correct.
The owner of the lot continues to own and have
And live there.
100% control over the balance of that property, right?
Yes,
You have, right of access to the driveway?
to the driveway and to the, if you look at the second page of the packet, you'll see that yellow spot, that's Mr. Happy's farm.
Yeah.
So even if you look at shortest pedestrian route, as Erica
Oh, I'm
mentioned.
not worried about pedestrian now. I'm focusing on the issue of abutment.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, right.
I think you may be going down a rabbit hole.
Well, maybe.
Back out.
The owner of the lot is an owner.
That's true too. Yeah,
So
that's
it
true, too.
doesn't make any difference
Yeah.
where the footprint is, because he owns both. Or is an owner, he owns all of one and part of another.
Yeah.
So I don't think that would be a very productive thing to
Thank
do.
you for putting me on that.
What might be productive here, for me, and I don't pretend to understand how other communities do this, and I understand that we have a certain responsibility, and this is a new industry, and it's new for us. But it would seem to me that if our rules state that the applicant needs to notify a community council, that we need to notify the community council, that we need to consider objections from a community council. But if we were to get a protest from a local government, then we would have to determine that that was arbitrary and capricious to ignore it. And that's not the standard for the community council. So, is the community council's recourse on this issue the Matsu Borough? Does the Matsu Borough issue an occupancy permit? Do they said they paid the Matsu Borough. I guess my question is, are we sort of the last in line for this to be protested as opposed to the first? If the school district doesn't object, the Matsu Borough doesn't object, we get notified and suddenly we have to be the arbiter, and all of a sudden we're gonna make the Matsu Borough mad because we're overruling them or whatever. See where I'm going? If this was Juneau and we gave a conditional use permit and somebody complained that we as a board issued a license, we would go, we got no protest from the city, you got your permit from the city. First recourse would be to go back to the city to see if they issued the conditional use permit illegally, and if they had, or in error, then that would then come to us, we'd have to decide what to do. So are we first in line or last in line on this particular one? Given deference to an ongoing business and a error that we're not necessarily admitting we made yet, is a corrective action or start with the borough and then come to us?
Through the chair, Mr. Jones, I can tell you that because this is a limited cultivation facility, there is no conditional use requirement from the borough. As noted, the borough did not protest this license, but I am under the impression that the borough does not feel that it is their responsibility to evaluate things to evaluate compliance with the state's requirements.
However, we were required, or my client was required to get a business license from Matsu Borough. So it would seem that Matsu would have jurisdiction if they have a business license with Matsu. And I'm so confused as to whether or not the community council actually objected or just this one person. I didn't see anything that was from the community council.
The reason that I brought this back to the board is because the board was unaware at the time that it reviewed this application that it was potentially within the required separation from a school. Because
I understand that.
So the information that was provided to me it didn't really matter where it came from. The fact that that information wasn't given to the board or the board didn't have it at the time it made its decision, is why this is before the board at this time.
I absolutely understand why you brought it back to the board. I'm just asking, I didn't see anything in the tab that was from the community council, official community council correspondence.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, that's my question, is, we don't really have a community council objection, we have a person objection, and that's valid and should be discussed, but I don't want to give it more, I don't want to label it the wrong type of objection.
And Mr. Chair, if I may just throw one more issue down the rabbit hole for you. This is an issue that's come up before, as you know, in determining the proximity of a proposed application to a youth or a youth facility or a school. I don't think the board has paused to define pedestrian route. That's something you could do. Alaska is a lacework of probably thousands of miles of trails. And we all have kids who've been on all of those trails. I'm not sure the board would, and it's up to you, completely define every place that kids can wander in the woods as a pedestrian route. I think that would be a productive thing for the board to visit and define that, because this is going to come up again and again. What is a pedestrian route? Is it like a thoroughfare with a sidewalk or along a road? Is it a place that's a kind of a route that's accessible to a wide variety of pedestrians? Is it a game trail that people just happen to travel on once in a while? I think, once again, this is one of those areas that makes working in Alaska so unique and so challenging, but I would just suggest that the board think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Director, to what level do your concerns rise on the chronological process involved in getting this to us and us approving it? I mean, do you think that anybody attempted to deceive AMCO or the board?
I make no allegations that anybody attempted to deceive us. I think because the board has not clarified to the staff what a shortest pedestrian route is, that it is very important that the board understand any sort of proximity to a school ground so that the board can make an evaluation absent a clearer definition. If the staff had been aware of this, this would have been raised at the first consideration. I am not alleging that there is a pedestrian route here or not, but I think because we don't have clarity on that issue, this is something that the board needs to evaluate. I am thinking that it may be best to put on our application a question of, how close is the nearest school as the crow flies, so that we can at least identify that, okay, there is a closeness in this situation, but it doesn't actually, qualify as being within the shortest pedestrian route. And of course, just earlier today, you opened a regulations project to reevaluate this whole section, so maybe it'll look different in a little bit. So I am not, I am certainly not alleging conscious hiding of things by the applicant, and I regret that we didn't know this beforehand.
Yes, sir. At the risk of setting a precedent, I think that our prudent action today is no action. I think the regulation project we can deal with, especially as it relates to the school. If this had some defined trails, if this was a high school, I would be less concerned, or more concerned. This is an elementary school. If there are elementary students out in the woods within 500 feet of that building, not accompanied by an adult, as a parent, I'd be more angry at the school than would be at the Marijuana Control Board. Subsequent to that, we've been told by the attorney that, we don't arbitrate disputes on, neighborhood covenants and subdivision covenants. That's something can privately be done between the homeowners association and any of their members in court. And absent, sort of clear precedent from other places, sometimes it's better to, understand that you may be taken to court for your decision, and that may well help you define your future decisions. But I think that our best course is to acknowledge that we've been notified, to acknowledge that we've had the public testimony, to acknowledge that we've had the discussion, to let the industry know we want all this information. But I think our most prudent course today is, thank you very much, licensee. You're an operating licensee, and we're taking no action. I just think that's our most prudent course today.
And thus, you, the board, have determined that this is the shortest pedestrian route does not,
yes,
would go in a different location.
I don't know if I would necessarily add that yet, but yes, I think that would be okay to add that to what I just said. But I firmly believe, I think our most prudent action today is nothing. I don't think nothing requires a motion.
No. Last time I checked. Any comments, thoughts? Mr. Miller?
This is a pedestrian route issue, and it does need to be better defined. I know that a couple of municipalities did a lot of work on it, so maybe we could take some of their work and get a regulations project going here to better define it, so we don't have to deal with issues like this in the future.
Okay, very good.
Erica's well qualified for that.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, we gotta be out of here, what time, 5?
Yes.
Okay.
Not a moment after.
Not a moment after.
We read the riot act yesterday.
Oh, really? Well, yeah, but that's the ABC board, man. I mean, I wouldn't want them around me anymore.
If you had free drinks, you wouldn't have heard anything.
All right, let's move on to tab 15, new marijuana handler education course provider applications, Alaska marijuana handler permit training, are serving. Okay.
Let me open the phone.
Yeah, that's just one.
The conference is no longer in listen-only mode.
Marijuana Control Board, we are looking for applicant for a new permanent education course, are serving.
Yes, hello, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I'm from our serving.
Okay, very good. Just hold on one second. Do we have a motion on this application?
Motion to approve MHCP 032, are serving.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Miller. Is there a second? I'm not hearing a second on the motion.
I guess I will second for matter of discussion.
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you. All right, ma'am, go ahead and introduce yourself to us.
Yes, thank you. My name is Jesse Daw, and I'm an employee at Our Serving. Our Serving is a company that's been in business for about 20 years, developing online courses, including the technology to deliver those. We work primarily in food safety certification throughout the country, responsible bartending, alcohol serving, and so forth.
All right, and you're down in South Dakota?
Yes, South Dakota.
Okay, and is it a corporation, or who's the Miss Olson on here? Hannah Olson. Is she the owner of the business?
No, she's not. She's the operations manager. Mr. Rob Graham owns the business.
Okay, is it a corporation, or not that we need a whole lot of detail on that, but see, a sole proprietorship?
Yeah, it's a private business.
Okay, so is it strictly online, this course?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We also have, because of our food safety certification courses and responsible bartending, our telephones are staffed 12 hours a day, and then we get back to any messages left within the next day, the next business day, so, and including Saturdays.
All right, Mr. Chair. Yes, sir.
Do you have any business experience in Alaska?
We have an alcohol course that has, I'm not sure of the details of that, but I know that Hannah has done some business with Alaska relative to the alcohol area, with the alcohol control board.
Okay, how come the lesson quiz on here is blanked out? You've got 15 questions. I don't know the first part. This is lesson quiz, and that's redacted.
Mr. Chair, the tabs that were put online were redacted,
Okay.
but I believe we put the answers in your confidential file.
Yes, sir, I think that would be for test security reasons.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay, I see that. There we go. All right, yep. Okay. And so, our serving has been in the online education business. What else, do you do anything besides food safety and?
Yes, we do. We've also recently developed a sexual harassment prevention course that's used primarily in the state of New York, based on some new laws that they've passed. It's also been picked up by a lumber company throughout the Northeast. We do also offer a course in home safety inspector certification.
Okay, and your developers, not your coders, but the people who develop these questions.
Yes.
What are their qualifications?
Yes, so I'm the primary developer of this course. I hold a PhD in kinesiology. I've been a former university faculty member for 16 plus years, where I've taught tests and measurements and graduate research and design, for instance.
Okay. All right, and have you been up here to?
The fire getting closer to your house?
No, this is. You guys, your phone is closer to your house. You're unmuted. Can you mute your phones for us? Thanks. Okay. This is currently up to date with the latest regulations from May 9th, or you know.
Yes, we have included some marketing, some of the newer marketing regulations, as well as the on-site consumption permit application information.
Okay, all right. Any questions for the applicant? Have you had a chance to look through this? Okay, I'm not hearing any other questions. The license, so we'll do roll call. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Heine?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so there you go. You're approved.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your attention and your review.
All right, thank you. Good luck. It's a competitive field. All right, we're moving on to 3-year review. Start with Alaska Marijuana Handler Certification Course. Ms. Phelps, are you here? Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir, I am right here.
Okay, just hold the phone for a second. Yeah, good.
Simple question. I understand that this is a 3-year review, and this wasn't sent out early, so it was one of those things that probably didn't get my fullest review. But until I actually looked at the agenda, if I just looked at the content of the tab, I couldn't tell what course it was, who the owner was. It didn't have like the first page of the course on there. It didn't have the address. If I go to that tab now that's in here, I see no identification as to who it is. I also understand that the staff doesn't take a position and review these like do that. So, I have some
They called
difficulty.
one person
Are
today,
there any changes
and that
made?
person wasn't even there or on the phone.
I can't hear you.
That's me,
Person who wasn't there, that's on the phone, can you please mute your phone?
People
So you have your speaker.
online, people who are violation, and
Okay,
it's
ma'am,
ridiculous.
somebody's given a synopsis, it sounds like the
Just
meeting.
like
Phone.
I can't hear you, sir. I can't hear you.
Yeah, I know, because there's somebody talking over you.
And my identification information is right on page 1, the name of the course, my business name, my email, and my phone number is all on page 1 of the documents that I sent in.
I see it, I see that.
Through the chair, Mr. Jones, we didn't have a 3-year review application form as we do for new courses, and we can easily develop that. And I apologize for not getting these to you more in advance. If you would like to take some more time and push this off, that's fine.
My point was, if these are renewals, and without any ability to know whether they made changes based on our regulation changes, which they're required to do, and I think we passed a regulation that said if we pass a regulation, you have to make your changes. I just didn't know if we needed to just renew all of them. No need to spend a lot of time, and maybe I'm spending too much time already that I'm taking up from them. And, just approve these, because I have no idea if they've changed. I have no idea, if they kept up. I have no standards by which to do it. So, I guess I could err on, okay, I approve it, or err on, no, I don't approve any of them, because I really don't know if they're up to speed or changed, because we haven't gotten a form that says, 3 years ago you did this and you were approved, you made the following changes in the last 3 years based on the regulations we've changed. Not criticism of anybody, but my concern over all of these handler courses is I really don't know if they do us any good. If we really are improving the skills of employees we're requiring to have these. But that's another issue. But I don't want to spend a lot of time going through this one by one.
Yeah.
If they're all renewals, we feel they've all been kept up. We haven't had any problem with complaints from people trying to get handler courses, and everybody seems to be, see where I'm going? I don't know if we need to spend the time, so.
I hear what you're saying. I also wonder, would you approve this if it was a new course? Does it have all of the things you look for in a new course? I think, one of our huge challenges in the office is sort of tracking changes to the information we receive, tracking changes to operating plans, tracking changes to premises, how to compare old information versus new information and keep what is current, most current. So it makes me a little nervous to think that we're going to have the course providers submit all changes they've made.
I appreciate that,
Yeah.
and we, as a board, set the regulations up that you have to have this handler card. We said you need to get these handler cards based on the education.
Mm-hmm.
And then we set up, you can apply to teach these courses.
Mm-hmm.
But we have also taken on the responsibility as the board to be the sole reviewer.
Mm-hmm.
And as such, the way in which this has now come to us in a 3-year renewal is, I have no idea. So, and I didn't necessarily review it as if I hadn't seen it before, but I also didn't review it based on, yeah, I've seen this before, and now I know it's changed, because I have no idea what I approved 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Since at least I and Mr. Springer were here to do that 3 years ago.
It was a long time ago.
So I just wanted to express that, and with that, I will be quiet, because I basically probably didn't read any of these enough to make an informed vote of no or yes. So I will err on the yes, but I don't know that I have done a fair enough job board member of doing these reviews, but I also know, so I just want to express that we got to come up with a better way of checking these boxes and making sure that what's being taught is what we want it to be taught, and then we as a board have said, it's our job, not yours. With that, unless there's major objection from the staff or the attorney, I would just like to take all of the 3-year reviews and make a motion that. Oh, good, I'm glad the industry disagrees with me.
Well, there is one tab in here that didn't respond, and I assume they haven't responded yet.
Not that I have
So
heard.
if we're going to do that,
Okay.
we should at least remove that.
Which one was that?
Tab 18.
Okay. Well, then I guess I will move.
They're not in the confidential file either. It's 15, 16, 17, 19, 20,
Because
21.
they didn't submit anything.
Okay. That being the case, then, as President Kelly used to say, go ahead and make a motion, you think that works. So I'd say the motion for 15, 16, 17, and 19.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any other discussion? And, I think one indicator that the courses are probably doing okay is we don't see too many NOVs against individual, handler card holders that, they're saying, oh, I didn't know that was the rule, so. Okay, then, on the renewal of, MCP 32, 02, 03, 6, 8, and 9. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Jaime?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
I'm a yes, so those are all,
Mr. Chair?
yes, sir.
Then I would move that the Alaska Marijuana Handlers Permitting Course for Stony Brook Group LLC, we concur with the directors that she recommends we rescind the approval of this course.
Okay, there's a second?
Second.
All right, moved and seconded, any discussion? Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Jaime? Yes. Mr. Miller?
Yes.
I'm a yes, so that is rescinded. Brings us to, I think we probably get, we only have one, let's do this, Alaska Leaf. That is tab 22, Alaska Leaf here or represented. You move it in the back.
I'm attorney for Alaska Leaf, and I believe Lauren is on the phone.
This is Lauren Dreyer with Alaskan Leaf.
Okay, good afternoon.
So basically the issue with this MJ14, and we kind of did this to highlight some ideas or some issues that the industry is having when you have two licenses that are owned by the exact same entity and the exact same people. So Alaska Leaf has a retail license and a cultivation license, co-owned, co-located in the same building and the same. It's a pretty small area to take uses. Alaska Leaf also was one of, maybe one of two that has experienced, marijuana companies that has experienced an actual holdup, a robbery. And because of that, and for other security reasons, they are wanting to move their inventory storage into the safe and product storage area that is behind the second door of the facility. So there's a front door, and then there actually is an Arctic entry door, so this will be the third door, and then there's a third door that has a safe and a product storage. And they want to have all of their retail inventory stored in there. Problem with that is it's on the cultivation facility. Now, I read the regulations, and while I see the notation that Erica mentioned in her memo, that says that, marijuana cultivation facility is allowed to store the marijuana product that they have tracked in their inventory system on a licensed premises, but I don't find a prohibition that a co-located, co-owned marijuana licensee can't, for security's sake and for the security of its employees as well, not store their marijuana retail inventory in a secured product storage of the cultivation. And I will also note that you skipped over it, but there is a overlapping premises regulation change, and in that regulation change, Section 3 AAC 306-705, staff is proposing to amend the regs to specifically prohibit this practice. To specifically prohibit storing marijuana product in a co-owned area, I guess would be the, I might be phrasing it kind of wrong.
I believe it says the shared premises cannot be restricted at.
That's correct.
That will eliminate storage.
That will eliminate storage. So, because there is a proposed regulation project on this topic that says the opposite of what we want to do, that leads one to assume that this is currently allowed, but it also leads one to assume that maybe we should table this particular request, allow us to provide public comment to that overlapping premises regulation project, and provide some input to tweak it so you can allow for co-owned, co-located, centralized product storage that will be safer and better for licensees in the public.
Mr. Chair, can I mute the phone? Sorry, Mr. Dre.
The conference is now in listen-only mode.
The argument that because there's a proposal to specifically say you can't do this means that you can do it now is really not a valid argument. I think we've done several regulations projects to clarify things that were clear, that were within the scheme of the regulations, but not as clearly stated as they could have been. And the point of that regulations project was to talk about when licensed premises could overlap, because right now there's only very limited, you're only allowed to overlap a cultivation and a product manufacturing. And so to expand what can overlap and set the boundaries. So to say that because there's this project means that says you can't do it means that you can do it now, it doesn't, to me, does not follow.
I understand that point, but the point is still allowing public. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. The whole concept of having a seed-to-sale tracking system and separate licenses is that the product that is owned by a license is on that licensed premises. So,
I think from Mr. Chair, I don't know about necessarily, I would agree table as opposed to deny, because issues might change. But in most of the cases in which we have sort of punted to allow shared services, has generally been around an office, where, office staff or the owner would be during the day. We have been cautious when they have shared that space for the videoing and that data storage kind of thing. Sometimes that's been okay, and sometimes we really would like to see it in different places. I don't know that this is not big enough to subdivide, but it would still be the same. I think the other part, I think Brandon brought it up during public testimony, was the hubbing. I believe I'm trying to remember, we had a request from a cultivator to bring all the product from his other cultivating license to that premise to be processed to then be sold. And I believe we didn't allow that, if I remember correctly, because of the concern of tracking and that, bringing product from one place to another. So I agree tabling until we sort of get some comments and look at those regulations and talk about those maybe this afternoon. But, because I think my initial response would be similar to the director saying no, and I'm sure that's not what you would want to hear today. You may end up hearing it anyway, but...
What I would like to hear at some point, whether we get there today or whether we get there in September, is, if it's a co-owned license, if it's owned by one company and it owns both licenses, I'd like there to be a little bit better use of space, and particularly for security purposes. There's windows in the front of this store shop. This has already been a break-in, robbery, not a break-in, just a robbery with a gun. I would like my client to be able to protect his employees better, protect his products better, and not have all of the inventory for the retail be stored in the retail premises. That's what I would like. And I would be happy to propose that in detailed public comments to the regulation project, should that go out for public comment.
My only comment to that, and please make your comments to that, but I am not certain just because he's co-located, the retail should be exempt as any other retailer would be in requiring to provide a safe storage and to provide the security. And just because it's co-home, they wouldn't have to do that, except hidden away back behind in the cultivation. You know, therefore, a retailer who is owned and operated and in the same building with a cultivator has a different standard than a standalone retailer on what security and safe storage and that they have to provide. And I'll leave that alone. You can think about that during your public comment.
Okay, I will think about that during our public comment, but I would also note that offices can only be shared and security systems can only be shared if the licenses are co-owned by the same entity. That's to limit the risk of, you know, ownership changes in one company and having different employees. These are all the same employees for both licenses. They are all operating as one company because it is just one company. But again, I would request the tabling until September where we could provide public comment to the regulation project.
Well, we have asked when, I think there's at least several licensees where we have cultivation, retail, and manufacturing within the same complex, the same building. You know, we've asked about access. Does every employee have access to every area or not? You know, how do you control that in badge? And most of them are saying no, they don't have access to all the same areas. They have different entrances and different cards, and so there is some restricted access. So make your comments specific, but, you know, this one business may want to operate a little differently than others, but how others have operated, they have restricted access between the two.
And I just want to, if Lauren wanted to say anything, I didn't know if he had anything else to add.
The conference is no longer in listen-only mode.
Thank you, Jen. I don't have it.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think he said he didn't have anything.
Okay. So the retail safe, we're going to move the retail safe into the product storage room, but how stout is the retail safe besides being just...
That's already in there.
Safe, product storage safe, is that the retail safe?
It's in that's in the cultivation already. We want to utilize that.
Where is the retail?
It would be on,
Where are they?
Would be in the store area.
No, I mean, where are they storing their product now?
In the safe.
Yes.
All right, so that product storage safe that is through the first store is your retail safe.
So when this license was originally inspected and originally approved, this is how they handled it.
Yeah.
So this is updating it. So this is their current method of operation.
Okay. All right. So we'll I'll put this in the motion table. Second. All those say aye. Aye. Opposed. Okay, we'll see you in September as the one goes.
Thank you very much.
You bet. I wanted to do this today, but we got to be out of here close to 5. What do you guys think? I don't think we can necessarily do this endorsement half an hour, can we? Less than half an hour.
Mr. Chair, I'd just soon come back tomorrow. I think once we get into licensing, the quality of the applications are such that I don't have a lot of comments.
Yeah.
And so if I don't, then I know most of the others probably don't either.
Yeah,
we can get through those pretty quick.
Yeah, this on-site endorsement, I wanted to make sure that we get enough time. So let's do it first thing in the morning.
After the 9 o'clock executive session?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, yes, after the 9 o'clock executive session. Then we'll start with on-site and previous board actions all quick. And I don't know if you following the action here in the past, but we can sometimes do a new license in like 5 minutes, so. So with that, let us adjourn until 9 AM tomorrow morning, and we're gonna do the executive session right away. I don't know.
Send the numbers to Larry, please.
Maybe not forever. Everybody?
Don't get him started. We'll be here till after 5.
Don't get me started. No, it's wise words. Okay.
I agree. Now I'm gonna walk outside. Don't you boys leave me here.
Bring with me here.
The rest of my board is not with me. I have had many of those.
Okay. Well, my child will steal her